Chapter 183. Under Li Yi's strong request, Mingsu reluctantly wrote down the contract. The content of the contract was just like what she said just now. The contract would last for half a year. If Li Yi didn't neglect his duties and did what a county lieutenant was supposed to do, she would personally write a letter to allow him to resign after half a year. This condition was very lenient. Li Yi felt that he wouldn't do any worse than the previous county lieutenant Zhou. After half a year, he would be a good man again. With the receipt personally signed by the princess in his bosom, he immediately felt much more at ease. His dejection was swept away, and he was in high spirits. In an instant, the elegant scholar turned into a dignified and handsome county magistrate. Lu Rui's training over the past few days had been very effective. At the very least, when he was serious, he looked like a completely different person. Seeing the sudden change in him, Li Mingzhu's eyes flashed with a strange light, and then she found it a little funny. What made him change so much was not a reward, but actually allowing him to resign from his position. It was the first time that she saw such a strange official. Autumn was actually the season to collect land rent. However, the benevolent emperor exempted Qing and prefecture and the neighboring prefectures from taxes for 2 years. There was no need to collect taxes during Li Yi's term of office. As for arresting thieves and trying cases, it wasn't that complicated. If anyone lost something, they would come to the yamen to file a case. The constables would symbolically investigate and find clues. Then, they would find the thieves and everyone would be happy. However, most cases couldn't be solved. After a long time, they would be left unsolved. The rate of solving cases was actually very low. In this aspect, there was no difference from the future. Unless it was a major case or a lawsuit that involved human life, it had to be treated seriously. However, if such a case really happened, the most anxious person should be County Magistrate Liu. As a county lieutenant, he only assisted the county magistrate in investigating the case, so he didn't make Li Yi worry too much. Fortunately, there weren't many cases like this, and there were only a few of them in a year. Most of the cases that needed to be dealt with were small cases such as fighting, theft, and robbery. Li Yi had already learned about these things from Lu Yi. Generally speaking, the county lieutenant's daily life was relatively leisurely. It wasn't as hard as he imagined. Just like the former county lieutenant Zhou, he usually stayed in the county government office. Things like patrolling the streets and maintaining public order were naturally done by his subordinates. He was basically a hands-off boss, and the busiest time was when he used public office for personal gain. When he spoke just now, he placed his hand on his chest. This is a very focused action, which means that what he said is very likely to be the truth. In the county jail, a man who was accused of theft was brought in. After a few questions, Li Yi explained to Mingsu. "Your Excellency, I really didn't steal anything." He didn't think that this unfamiliar lord would be willing to believe him. When the man heard this, he was startled for a moment before saying with tears and mucus flowing down his face. "Of course, this is not absolute. It's just a possibility. But at least it can clear him of some suspicion and focus more attention elsewhere." As for the suspect just now, his answers seemed to be flawless, but when he was asked to tell the situation backward, he made a lot of mistakes, which means that he didn't do it at all. It's more likely that he was lying. Similarly, this can only be used as a reference, and specific evidence is still needed. Mingsu looked at the scribe next to her, who was writing at a fast speed and recording down every word that Li Yi had said just now. Although she hadn't figured out the basis of Li Yi's theory for the time being, it was undoubtedly correct. Just now, several suspects were baffled by his interlocking questions. In the end, they contradicted themselves and gave themselves away in their words, so they had no choice but to confess. This was obviously a gentler and more effective interrogation method. If it could be summarized into a book and implemented by the Ministry of Justice in all the government offices, it could greatly improve the efficiency of the trial, reduce the use of torture tools, and benefit the people. It would be a great contribution. She had already asked someone to record what Li Yi had said in the court last time. During this period of time, she had tested it on many people. Although it didn't match every time, it was proven in most cases. Did you think of all these things yourself? Mingsu looked at him, her beautiful eyes full of doubt. This magical method of distinguishing lies required a lot of experience and meticulous observation. If it was suggested by an experienced official, it would be barely acceptable, but with his age and experience, this matter was really suspicious. This matter, I have to start from a winter many years ago. Li Yi's face revealed a look of reminiscence. Later, when he left, to thank me for saving his life, the old man gave me an ancient book, which was written in the book. Li Yi used the name of the nameless old man again. Where's the book? Mingsu asked. I lost it. Li Yi replied without a blush or gasping for breath. Mingsu knew that she couldn't get any truth from him today, but it didn't matter. There was still half a year, enough for her to dig out more useful things from him. When he left the county jail, he saw Lu Yishui still wandering in front of the duty room. Li Yi waved his hand and signaled him to come over. Your Excellency, what's the matter? Lu Yishui asked with a face full of smiles. Go and get a map of the prefecture city. On the first day of County Magistrate Li's office, all the yamen runners were gathered together. Arresterly had just announced that from that day on, they had to learn something every day. Every once in a while, there would be an assessment. Those who failed the assessment 3 times could pack up and go home. Although these yamen runners were also lowly people, because they worked in the yamen, they usually had to bow and scrape to the officials. In front of the ordinary people, they could be regarded as half an official. No one wanted to lose this ancestral rice bowl. In addition, County Magistrate Li also set some new rules. When they went out to patrol the streets, they would no longer wander aimlessly. County Magistrate Li divided the prefecture city into small areas, and each of them had their own jurisdiction. They only needed to be responsible for the security of their respective areas. This seemed to be a little easier, but everyone knew in their hearts that although they had a clearer division of labor, their responsibilities were also clearer. They could no longer have the thought of idling around in the yamen by doing errands in the yamen. Some people were happy, while some were worried. Lu Yishui, who had been promoted by County Magistrate Lu to be the monitor, was one of the happy ones. After knowing that what they were going to learn was what County Magistrate Li showed in the court that day, which was a method to distinguish lies and make suspects confess without torture, they even faintly looked forward to the training class that County Magistrate Li mentioned. Chapter 184. At the behest of County Magistrate Li, a free training class for the constables and yamen runners was officially held. Of course, County Magistrate Li was busy with official business and had no time to teach them personally. A literate scribe in the yamen was the teacher for the time being. He held a booklet with County Magistrate Li's quotations and analyzed the specific cases one by one. The scribe had witnessed how County Magistrate Li tried cases with his own eyes, so he was very familiar with the process. At first, the yamen runners just wanted to pass the test and keep their jobs. After listening for a while, they forgot about these things and showed an interested expression. Only then did they know that what the scribe taught them was the magical interrogation method of County Magistrate Li. As an ordinary yamen runner, if he learned this, he would undoubtedly have a special skill and would be valued wherever he went. Just like Lu Yishui, no matter how fierce and tough the criminal was, he could only obediently sign in his hands. During this period of time, he had made many outstanding achievements and had become the right-hand man of County Magistrate Lu. Half a month ago, he was just an ordinary yamen runner like them, but now he had become a monitor, which was envied by everyone. Of course, they didn't have Lu Yishui's talent, so they could only make up for it with hard work. It was impossible for them to become a monitor. It was their short-term goal to be valued by County Magistrate Lee or County Magistrate Liu. The training class before him was undoubtedly a rare opportunity. Daniel, tell me honestly, did you go to the brothel again last night? During the break, a skinny yamen runner suddenly turned his head and asked another yamen runner. Nonsense, I went home directly after leaving the yamen office yesterday. The yamen runner called Daniel was stunned for a while, then his face turned red and he said with a flushed face. Hee, you still dare to say no? You stuttered and didn't dare to look at me. The county magistrate said that you were lying. Since we are all men, we won't laugh at you. I just want to see if the method taught by the county magistrate is effective. The yamen runner had already understood the situation when he saw the yamen runner's expression, so he laughed and said, I didn't go. The yamen runner called Daniel controlled his emotions and said calmly. He thought to himself, why did County Magistrate Lee teach us these things? What secrets would we have in front of them in the future? Even if you don't tell us, we know. Another bailiff smiled mysteriously and said, the packet of aphrodisiac you secretly hid is gone. You must have gone to a brothel. There's no need to be so complicated. Look at how listless he is today. Where else could he have gone last night? Another bailiff jeered. Daniel's face turned as red as a monkey's butt. What was there to laugh about visiting a brothel? He spoke as if they had never visited one before. When he saw the scribe pick up the booklet again, he quickly changed the topic and said, it's about to begin. Listen carefully to Scribe Chen. If you miss out on anything and fail the test, be careful that you won't be able to keep your jobs. These words were quite a deterrent to the bailiffs. They stopped teasing Daniel and immediately straightened their attitude and listened attentively. Li Yi was very satisfied with the yamen runner's humble and eager attitude. In the future, the employees of big or small companies would go through pre-job training before they officially started work. Although these bailiffs were old foxes in the yamen, they were good at doing odd jobs and running errands. As an honorable people's yamen runner, their professional knowledge was far from enough. He didn't want to know how County Magistrate Zhou managed his subordinates in the past. At least in his place, he still attached great importance to the training of his employees. The key was, the more capable and the higher their execution, the fewer things that needed to be handled by Li Yi personally. In order to be a stable boss in the office, Li Yi was not stingy at all. He copied all the FBI's methods of investigating cases and detecting lies. These books were already common in the future. He picked out some useful ones. As for how effective they were, it would depend on their talents. After they had more or less mastered these things, it was time to bring out books like Criminal Psychology, Abnormal Psychology, Young Justice Bao, Shigong's Strange Case, and so on for them to broaden their horizons. The yamen runners in ancient times were actually not as high and mighty as people imagined. They were the same as prostitutes and actors. These yamen runners were usually hereditary. Their ancestors were all in this line of work. As long as they didn't lose an arm or a leg, they didn't need to be examined before they took up the post. When the father retired, the son could take over. With this kind of selection method, these yamen runners naturally didn't have any ability to speak of. The way they spent their days in the yamen was not what Li Yi wanted. He didn't need to train them into independent detectives. At the very least, they should have some basic qualities and be able to handle some small disputes. Li Yi was already very pleased that they didn't have to bother him with trivial matters. Through these 2 days of observation of the yamen runners, Li Yi discovered that the monitor named Lu Yi had some talent. When it came to interrogation by torture, he could often understand it with just a hint. He could be trained to be his right-hand man or something. It should save him a lot of trouble in the future. After pondering for 2 days, he set these rules for these yamen runners. At the end of the day, he just wanted to be a lazy county officer. He divided the responsibilities bit by bit according to the small areas. In the future, there were area policemen, and now there were area detectives. If there was any small dispute in the area, they would first try to solve it themselves. If they couldn't solve it, there would be a small captain in every 5 areas. If the small captain couldn't solve it, they could report it to the chief captain, Louis, to deal with it. If even Louis couldn't do anything, then Li or Emmingsu could only do it personally. Although Emmingsu knew that Li did this to be lazy, it seemed to be reasonable after thinking about it carefully. She believed that Li didn't do it on a whim. It would be better to observe for a period of time before making a decision. Now, Li could barely understand County Magistrate Lu's mood. With such a princess as his subordinate, he couldn't beat or scold her, and he had to consider the opinion of his subordinate when he did things. Such an official was really aggrieving. After reading a few books in the duty room, he estimated that it was almost time to get off work. He planned to call Fong back. The moment he walked out of the door, he saw 2 yamen runners escorting a man in. Li originally planned to leave directly. When he saw the appearance of the man, he was slightly stunned and walked over there. County officer. Seeing him coming, the 2 yamen runners hurriedly saluted. The man raised his head and saw the young man in official uniform walking over. He was also stunned for a moment, and then a trace of joy appeared on his face. Chapter 185. What's going on? Li walked in front of the 2 bailiffs and pointed at the man. One of the runners was stunned for a moment, and then immediately said, "Your Excellency, this man hurt people maliciously. We caught him on the street and are about to take him to the county jail." Benefactor. At this time, the man also reacted. He looked at Li and said with surprise. When the 2 runners saw this scene, they were immediately puzzled. Could it be that he knew the county lieutenant? It's just a small matter. Don't mention the word benefactor anymore. Li waved his hand to the man, and then asked the 2 runners, "Tell me the details. What's going on?" The burly man in front of him was the man he met the last time on the street when he solved the silver theft case. That day, he was stolen by the middle-aged scholar, and the 2 of them were arguing endlessly over the ownership of the silver. In order to get away from Li Mingzhu, Li made a bet with him on this matter and unintentionally helped him. At this moment, he still had an impression of him. The man was very filial to his mother, and didn't seem to be a criminal. It was not easy to stay in the county jail. Even if he was not tortured, it would be uncomfortable to stay there for a few days. If it was not a big deal, it would be okay to let him go. Seeing that the county magistrate was interested in the case, the yamen runner immediately told him everything he knew. Only then did Li know that the reason why the man was arrested was that he had hurt a shop assistant in the medicine shop. It was said that the shop assistant was greedy for a small profit and sold moldy medicinal herbs to the man. The man's mother was seriously ill, and after drinking the medicine, she almost died. It was with great difficulty that she managed to keep her life. After learning the truth from the doctor, the man was immediately angry. He rushed into the medicine shop and beat the shop assistant half to death. 2 passing runners happened to see him and arrested him. Although the shop assistant was wrong, it did not cause any serious trouble. Instead, the man beat him half to death and deliberately hurt him, so he was taken back to the government on the spot. "What's your name?" Li asked the man. "Sir, I am Wu Er." The burly man originally wanted to call him benefactor, but when he thought of what Li had just said, he immediately changed the way he addressed him and imitated the 2 bailiffs. Li turned his head to look at the 2 bailiffs and asked, "Is that fellow's injury serious?" One of the runners shook his head and said, "Even though his face is bruised and swollen, making him look terrifying, there's no danger to his life. He'll be fine after a few days of rest." Li nodded his head and said, "Take him back to prison, and every day he will have to be fed 2 meals in prison." This Wu Er is worried about his mother, and his filial piety is commendable. It is understandable that he acted on impulse. If there is nothing serious with the shop assistant, then let him go. The two bailiffs were stunned for a moment, then they immediately nodded. Yes, sir is right. The two let go of the man. Seeing that he was still standing there in a daze, one of them slapped his head and said, "What are you standing there for? Hurry up and thank the county lieutenant." The burly man came back to his senses, and a trace of joy appeared on his face. He immediately knelt down and said in a loud voice, "Thank you, county lieutenant. Thank you, county lieutenant." It was unknown where these people learned to kneel when they saw an official. Li Yi wanted to help him up, but the man's strength was not small. With a plop, he knelt on the ground and steadily kowtowed twice. All right, stop kowtowing. This time, it was because of your filial piety. In the future, think more before you act. If you have any problems, you can come to the government for help. Don't be so impulsive. Li Yi waved his hand and said. The burly man laughed and thanked him several times. Worried that no one would take care of his mother, he hurriedly left. Sir is so benevolent. I admire you. Ignoring the flattery of the two bailiffs, Li Yi waved his hand casually, called Fong from the back hall, and walked out of the county government. In this era, the working hours of officials were very different from those of the future. Because the main officials such as the county magistrate and the county magistrate lived in the government, they had to go to work at 6 or 7 o'clock in the morning. But they also got off work early. They could go home at about 3 or 4 o'clock in the afternoon. According to the unified rules, except for some important festivals, the officials had a rule of 1 day off every 5 days. That was to say, every 5 days they worked, they could have a day off to go home and take a bath. It was quite scientific. However, Li Yi was a special case in the county government. Perhaps Mingzu found her conscience and wanted to make up for what she owed him, so she relaxed many rigid rules for him. He didn't have to live in the county government, and he didn't have to go to work early in the morning. He was much freer than the county magistrate. Li Xian kept his word. Last time, he promised to give Li Yi a good horse, and Li Yi had received it a few days ago. Unfortunately, he hadn't learned how to ride a horse. The horse was temporarily requisitioned by Lu Rui. She seemed to like the horse very much. Since she requisitioned it, she didn't mention returning it. It was not only Li Yi's dream to ride a horse in fine clothes and travel the world with a sword. During this time, he had a lot of contact with Lu Rui. She liked the martial arts novels told by Li Yi the most. Every time Li Yi talked about those martial arts heroines, her eyes would shine. As his sister-in-law and martial arts coach, she had said that she would teach Li Yi how to ride a horse, and Li Yi had been looking forward to it for several days. He imagined that it must be very cool to ride a horse on the road in fine clothes. If he had a long sword like Lu Rui's, he might really look like a hero. Li Yi did not really like the saber that was given to him by his superiors. There was a saying that the sword was the leader of all weapons. In his impression, heroes usually used swords. When he thought of sabers, the first image that popped up in his mind should be a group of rugged men, each holding a large saber in their hands, rushing down the mountain, shouting, "This mountain is mine, this tree is planted by me." And so on. The feeling of incongruity was too strong. If there was a chance in the future, he would change to a sword. He always thought that Lu Rui looked very cool when she used a sword. Her expression was cold, and her sword was silent. If he was in Jianghu in the future, he could give himself a nickname of Deadly Fairy, which would probably shock a lot of people. Thinking about it carefully, the Princess Arrestor looked quite cool in her uniform with a knife on her waist. However, no one had ever seen her draw her knife. But thinking about the way she slashed around with her knife, no matter how cool she looked, it was all gone. After bargaining with Mingsu, Li Yi's life did not change much after he became the county lieutenant. He came down from Willow Village in the morning and went back in the afternoon. The only difference was that the place he stayed in during the day had changed from Rui Square to the county government office. It had just entered winter and it had not snowed yet, but the weather was already a little cold. When he went out in the morning, he told Xiao Huan to wait for him to come back in the afternoon for hot pot. At this time, they were probably already preparing. After walking into the village, Fong went back directly when he passed by the gate of his house. Li Yi continued to walk for a while. When he just stepped into the yard, he saw Sister Rui and Xiao Huan in the yard. Besides them, there was also a strange woman in the yard. The woman looked to be in her 30s or 40s. She wore colorful clothes and looked quite festive. At this time, she was saying something with a smile on her face. Seeing Xiao Huan running towards him, Li Yi looked at the woman with some doubts and asked, "Who is she?" The little maid showed a bitter expression and said in a low voice, "She is the official matchmaker. This time, she came to urge Second Miss to get married quickly. This year, she has been here several times." Chapter 186. Official Matchmaker. Li Yi was slightly taken aback by Xiao Huan's words. Previously, he had mistaken 10,000 gold as 10,000 taels of gold, which was extremely embarrassing. In order not to make such a low-level mistake again, he took some time to study the common sense of this world. Of course, this included etiquette, customs. Official matchmakers were also matchmakers, but they had an additional official identity compared to ordinary matchmakers. At this time, although there was no birth control, the population was still very small. Medical standards were still limited, and the average lifespan of people was not long. It was considered lucky to live to 50 years old. Every additional day of life was a blessing from God. If the population base could not be increased, it would lead to many problems. Without a population, where could the country find people to farm? How could the country collect taxes? If there was a war, where could they find people to join the army? How could they resist the foreign enemies? How could they maintain the prosperity of the nation? Therefore, every king regarded increasing the population as the top priority of the country's development. Since a few hundred years ago, early marriage and early childbearing had become a law and regulation that encouraged more children. Those who had more children would be rewarded, and those who had fewer children would be punished. There was even a law that a girl's entire family would be imprisoned if she did not get married before the age of 15. Although the marriage laws of the Jing kingdom were not so harsh, under the encouragement of the government, everyone was working hard to get married and have children. You're a 17 or 18-year-old girl who's still waiting to get married. Isn't this dragging the country down? Therefore, in addition to ordinary matchmakers, the profession of official matchmaker was also born. Any profession, as long as it was related to the word official, was not that simple. The official matchmaker's responsibility was to respond to the call of the country to solve the lifelong problems of unmarried men and women of the right age. If the other party did not agree, they could even force them to be matched. Based on the concept of, if you don't want to get married, I'll help you, these official matchmakers traveled from village to village. When necessary, they could also force two single dogs of the right age to be together. Every time they did something good, not only would they receive a gift from the man's family, the government would also give them a certain reward. This greatly increased their enthusiasm. Lu Rui was 16 years old. In the future, she was still a young girl in her prime. However, in the current era, she was undoubtedly an old lady. This kind of old lady was naturally the focus of the official media. "Miss, it's not that I want to scold you, but you're not young anymore. How many women your age have children that can call mother? Look at you, how many times have I come to your house? How many marriages have I talked about? Why don't you get it? In the courtyard, the official matchmaker with a mole on the corner of her mouth was still talking incessantly. Lu Rui had a helpless look on her face. Lu Rui's gaze was fixed in front of her. Her eyes were wandering, and it was obvious that she was distracted. The official matchmaker's mouth did not stop. Suddenly, he asked curiously, "I remember that when I came last time, your sister wasn't married either. It's only been a few months. How did she get married? I wonder which matchmaker arranged it. Why didn't she register it with the authorities?" Her tone was a little regretful. She was responsible for the marriages of men and women of the right age in Willow Leaf Village and the nearby villages. If she could arrange a marriage, she would inevitably be rewarded. If someone else took it away, she would have nothing to do with it. If she knew which matchmaker was so unruly, she would definitely teach her a lesson next time. In this line of work, one must abide by the rules of this line of work. She could not stretch her hand too far. Lu Rui did not speak. The reason why she made that decision some time ago was not only because of Second Aunt and the others, but also because the official matchmaker had come to her house countless times. If it was delayed for a while, she was afraid that she would be fined. At that time, they did not have any extra food at home. The official matchmaker looked at Lu Rui and said, "Miss, I didn't mistreat you at all. Miss, you are so beautiful, and I can't bear to say bad things about a bad family. Last time, you were not satisfied with Blacksmith Wang's eldest son, so this time, I left the best for you. Although Master Su's son is a little silly, he has a cloth shop in the prefecture city. He has maids and servants, and a big house. He doesn't lack anything. If you marry him, you will be the mistress of the Su family. What do you think? If you agree, I'll immediately reply to Master Su's letter, and the marriage can be settled within these 2 days. If it drags on for too long, and Master Su agrees to someone else, then there's nothing we can do." There's a large group of people squeezing into the Su family's door. There was still no change in Lu Rui's expression, as if she did not hear the official matchmaker's words. "Miss, I can't help you delay this marriage any longer. If you still don't agree, I'm afraid the higher-ups will send people to punish you soon." The official matchmaker tried to persuade her. Li found it a little funny when he heard this. Maids, servants, and a big house. Tempting Fong with such conditions might work, but Mississippi Lu was someone who had seen the world now. The money she had saved up was probably enough to empty out the cloth shop. The official matchmaker was originally confident about today's marriage. She knew the situation of the young lady's family. A few months ago, they were so poor that they could barely eat. Although the Su family was not a wealthy family, and it was an exaggeration to say that she would marry them and become the mistress of the Su family, at least she would not have to worry about food and clothing. Wouldn't it be 1,000 times better than here? As she thought about this, her gaze swept across the two sisters. Suddenly, her expression froze, and then astonishment appeared on her face. The last time she came, they were dressed in ordinary clothes. Today, these 2 sets of clothes were probably worth a lot of money. Looking at the hairpin in the elder sister's hair, she felt that it was vaguely familiar. After thinking for a while, she remembered that she had seen it at the most famous silver shop in the prefecture, Golden Jade Lane. It was worth at least a few dozen taels of silver. After so many years of hardship, of course, Lu Rui would not be so extravagant as to spend a few dozen taels of silver to buy a golden hairpin. This hairpin was given to her by Li Yi some time ago. However, she did not know that the official matchmaker was also puzzled. It had only been a few months since they last saw each other. Could it be that the 2 sisters had made a fortune? However, even if they had really become wealthy, they still had to get married. If it was delayed any longer, it would not be as simple as the punishment of rations. Li Yi was standing nearby watching the bustle. The courtyard door was suddenly pushed open. Fong had just walked in and saw Li Yi. He rubbed his head and said embarrassedly, "Sun Yi, the cloth that you gave to my family last time, do you still have it? Zhu Zi was playing with fire at home today and accidentally burned the cloth. I gave him a beating. Li Yi did not wait for him to finish and ordered the little servant girl, go to the room and bring another roll of cloth out. Fong was considered a wealthy person now and could afford a roll of cloth. But the significance of the cloth given by the emperor was different. If it was burned by Zhu Zi just like that, he would probably be heartbroken. Li Yi silently mourned for the naughty brats but for a while. Xiao Huan nodded her head and ran briskly into the room. After a while, she came out carrying a roll of cloth. The last time the emperor rewarded them with too much cloth. They had given out a lot and there was still a large pile left. It would not hurt to give a few more rolls to the little servant girl. The official matchmaker watched as the little servant girl with a silver hairpin ran past him. When his gaze swept to the silk cloth in her arms, a trace of surprise appeared on his face again. This is good material. Chapter 187. The official matchmaker was also a matchmaker. Although a matchmaker only relied on her mouth to turn white into black, she spent her days running around and building bridges. Naturally, she was more knowledgeable. She did not train her eyes for nothing. Even without personally touching the cloth in the servant girl's hands, she could tell that the material was not ordinary. In Qing and Prefectural City, this kind of cloth could only be found in the top-notch cloth shops. She felt very strange in her heart. What exactly had happened to these two sisters in the past few months? The last time she came, their family situation was still very difficult. Not long after, even the little servant girl was dressed in silk and satin. The price of the silver hairpin in her hair was probably more than her annual salary. In this way, even the servant girl in their family was treated like a young mistress. It was normal for them to look down on Master Su's family. However, seeing that it was almost the end of the year, she still needed to matchmake a few more couples to reach the required number. She raised her head to look at Lu Rui and said, "Miss, you can't ask for too much. Marriage is about matching families. We can't reach a higher level. If you still don't understand, the next time you come, it won't be me." The official matchmaker's words were vague, but Lu's sister Rui understood. The next time it wasn't her, it would be the officials. If it was a few months ago, even they would have a headache over such a matter. But now, this kind of threat had no effect. Lu Rui saw Li Yi walking over and greeted him, "Hubby, you're back." The official matchmaker also turned his head and saw the handsome young man walking over. Hearing Lu Rui's greeting, he immediately understood that this must be the woman's husband. Looking at the situation, he must be marrying into the family. This young man was handsome. It would be a pity if he married into the family. How much betrothal gift is the Su family willing to offer? Li Yi turned his head to look at the official matchmaker and asked with a smile. Hearing this, Lu Rui's expression changed. A dangerous light flashed in her eyes as she looked at Li Yi. "Husband." Lu Rui tugged at his sleeve and shook her head. She and Lu Rui had depended on each other since they were young and had a deep sisterly bond. To her, she naturally did not want Rui to marry someone she did not like. The official matchmaker was stunned. Judging from the scholar's attitude, there seemed to be room for negotiation. A hint of joy appeared on his face as he said, "You can rest assured. Master Su's family is rich. I believe the betrothal gifts will definitely satisfy you. If the Su family is willing to pay 10,000 gold taels as a betrothal gift, this matter is not impossible to discuss." Li Yi was still brooding over the previous matter. What? The official media couldn't believe his ears and repeated, 10,000 taels of gold. Seeing Li Yi nod his head, the official media was stunned on the spot, looking at him with a strange expression. 10,000 taels of gold. Did she know how much money that was? Even an emperor marrying a princess would not need so much as a betrothal gift, right? She had originally thought that such a small family would not be able to see much. Even if the betrothal gift was a bit too much, she could go back and discuss it with Master Su. It was not impossible. But 10,000 taels of gold, even if the Su family sold themselves 10 times over, they would not be able to gather that much. Hearing Li Yi's words, Lu Rui's pretty face was also a bit stunned. She knew that he was probably just messing around, so she smiled and did not say anything else. Lu Rui glanced at him and the coldness on her face disappeared. "Ah, young master, please don't joke around. 10,000 taels of gold, who in the entire Qing and prefecture would be able to take out such an expensive betrothal gift?" The official agent's mouth twitched as he spoke with a fake smile. 10,000 taels of gold was a huge sum of money to anyone. Perhaps there were many people in the Qing and prefecture who could take out this much money, but only a fool would use 10,000 taels of gold as a betrothal gift. "Then I can only apologize," Li Yi said regretfully. "I hope this official matchmaker can make things convenient for me. You don't have to worry about my wife's sister's marriage in the future." Although his sister-in-law's temper was not very good, she was beautiful and skilled in martial arts. If she could not be sold for a good price, wouldn't it be a great loss? "I'm afraid that won't do. Scholar, you are taking things for granted." The official matchmaker sneered, thinking that this young scholar looked arrogant. Women of the right age had to marry. This was a rule since ancient times. She was only an official matchmaker and did not have such great power. She said in a strange tone, "Men and women should get married when they are of age. This lady is not young anymore. It is the right thing to do to get married as soon as possible. Otherwise, it will not be good when the higher-ups punish you. How dare you speak to the county lieutenant like this?" Old Fong took the piece of cloth from Xiao Huan and was about to leave when he heard the strange voice of the official media. His brows involuntarily sank as he strode over and said. He had been with Li Yi for the past 2 days and stayed in the yamen. Most of the people he came into contact with were the yamen runners and he had learned some things from them. Although this was not the yamen, this woman dared to laugh at the son-in-law. If the yamen runners were here, they would not let it go so easily. The official matchmaker was still sneering in her heart when she was suddenly startled by a big man who walked over and scolded her. When she came to her senses and was about to scold him, she suddenly remembered that he had just said, "County Lieutenant." She was shocked again. She had long heard that the previous county lieutenant Zhou had been removed from office and a new county lieutenant had come to the yamen, but she had never seen him before. Could it be this young man in front of her? Although she still had some doubts in her heart, she thought that no one would dare to fake this kind of thing. She looked at Li Yi with a slightly respectful expression and asked, You are the county lieutenant." Li Yi took out the county lieutenant's waist token and waved it in front of her. "Ah, it's all my fault for offending you just now. Please forgive me, Your Excellency." Seeing the waist token, the official matchmaker had no doubts in her heart and immediately said with a panicked expression. Before Li Yi spoke, she said again, "Don't worry, Your Excellency. This girl's marriage will be decided by herself. There will be no official matchmaker in the future, and the higher-ups will not send anyone to urge her." Thinking of what she had just said to the county lieutenant, the official matchmaker wanted to slap herself a few times. At this moment, she hurriedly said to make up for it. Although she did not have such power as an official matchmaker, as long as she revealed a little of the county lieutenant's intention, those people would definitely not dare to make things difficult for the county lieutenant's family. At this moment, Li Yi felt that it was not bad to have the identity of a county lieutenant. At least it would make many things more convenient. He waved his hand to the official matchmaker and said, "You just said that after getting married, where should we go to register?" "Don't worry, Your Excellency. After going back, I will take care of this matter properly," the official matchmaker said very sensibly. Who would have thought that this sister would be so lucky to have a relationship with the county lieutenant? If she had known earlier, she would not have dared to put on such an attitude just now. After being reminded by the official matchmaker just now, Li Yi realized that marriage also needed to be registered in this era. After thinking about it carefully, he realized that he and Rui had actually been an illegal couple for so long. Lu Rui's gaze froze when she saw him calmly talking to the official matchmaker about this matter, and the expression on her pretty face became slightly absent-minded. After registering with the government, they would be a real couple. Registering with the government required the birth date and horoscope. Li Yi converted it according to his birthday in his previous life. When he turned around, he saw Rui standing there in a daze. He stretched out his hand and waved it in front of her eyes. He asked doubtfully, "Rui, why are you in a daze?" "He's asking for your birth date and horoscope." Chapter 188. After seeing his waist token, the official media's attitude immediately took a 180-degree turn. He spoke politely and respectfully, and the wrinkles at the corner of his eyes could even blossom. Li Yi finally understood why the scholars in ancient times had sharpened their brains to drill into the officialdom. Realizing their life ambitions and serving the country were all said for others to hear. Of course, there was no lack of people who were really loyal to the emperor and loved their country, but most of them only cared about the limitless glory and the power in their hands after becoming an official. After all, even a small county lieutenant of the 8th rank could not be underestimated in a district or a county. No wonder so many people flocked to the imperial examinations every year. If they were lucky and could get an official position, they could bring honor to their ancestors and reach the pinnacle of life. If it wasn't for the fact that he had lived 2 lives and was used to being lazy, not wanting to be restrained by the rules and regulations of the officialdom, and not having much pursuit for these things, he might not be able to resist the temptation of being called county lieutenant by so many people for a long time. After the official media finished asking what he needed to ask, he immediately took his leave. He was afraid that everything would be settled by the next morning. Before she came, Xiaohuan had already prepared the charcoal stove. After such a long delay, the stove fire had long been extinguished, so she hurriedly went to light the fire. As usual, the mutton was cut by Lu Rui. The knife in her hand danced up and down at an extremely fast speed. Li Yi could not see her movements clearly, but the mutton she cut was as thin as a cicada's wing. The knife skills were exquisite, which made him extremely envious. After washing the vegetables with Lu Rui outside, the stove fire was also blazing. They first put some in the pot, and the whole family waited patiently around the stove. Li Yi would teach Xiaohuan a new dish every few days. Most of the time, Lu Rui would also follow along and learn. Now was not like a few months ago. Every meal was porridge and white flour. Even on normal days, the meals were exceptionally sumptuous, but to say the most popular was still the hot pot. Whether it was the ancients or the modern people, this thing had a mysterious charm, especially in the cold season. It was even more comfortable to eat. After a few days, when it was snowing and freezing outside, the whole family would gather around the stove to eat hot pot. That was the true enjoyment. Old Fong became addicted to it after freeloading for a meal. He made a mandarin duck pot from a blacksmith in the prefectural city, took it home, and poured all the meat, vegetables, seasonings, oil, salt, soy sauce, vinegar, and so on into it. Halfway through, Juzi couldn't help but vomit after taking the first bite. "Little brat, how long has it been, and your mouth has become so picky?" Fong frowned and kicked the brat's butt. He picked up the chopsticks and scooped a mouthful of bloody mutton from the pot, chewed it a few times, and vomited it without swallowing it. Later, he realized that there might be some tricks in this thing that he hadn't figured out, and he couldn't bring himself to do it, so he sent his wife to ask Xiaohuan. Before he left, he brought back some of Li Yi's homemade hot pot base. Since then, Fong's internal heat hadn't gotten better, and he always had the smell of mutton on him. Every day, he followed Li Yi back and forth between the prefectural city and the stockade village, and Li Yi usually kept a sufficient distance from him. Today, when they were eating hot pot, Lu Rui didn't fight with him, which was rare. Li Yi thought that she had finally listened to the etiquette of hot pot that he had painstakingly taught her, and he was very pleased. In the days when he first came to this world, the biggest problem he faced was how to fill his stomach. It wasn't enough to fill his stomach, and he also needed to solve the problem of feeding his family. At that time, what Li Yi hoped for was just to eat a few more grains of rice in the porridge he ate every day, and to have more oil and vegetables in his plain noodles, and he would be satisfied. When he first came to this world, he had an inexplicable repulsion and fear towards this world. He wanted to live a comfortable life without starving, and it wasn't in vain that God had given him a second chance in life. Although there was a small problem with the initial setting, such as the location and the era, and the poor family situation, fortunately, the gender didn't change. These days, although there were many twists and turns, everything was still smooth. Later, the problem of feeding his family was solved, and he had to solve more people's problems. Fang, as well as those who didn't mistreat Lu's sister Rui all these years, had bigger and bigger businesses, and got to know more and more people, including little princes, princesses, and even the emperor. Inexplicably, he climbed to the position of county lieutenant, and countless people had to salute him respectfully and call him county lieutenant. This was too different from Li Yi's original ideal. It should be known that he just wanted to make some money to live in retirement here. However, ideals would change with time. If he stayed in Willow Leaf Village like this for the rest of his life, he would probably die of boredom soon. Even if he wanted to live in retirement, he had to change a place. After a period of time, when he had enough money, he would buy a house in the prefectural city and bring Rui and the others there. It was not only troublesome but also tiring to run back and forth between the prefectural city and the village every day. After dinner, there was still a long time before it got dark. Li Yi walked around the yard for a while to digest the food, and he thought about how he should be lazy tomorrow. He sat in the county government office and drank tea all day, and he went to the latrine a lot. He was so bored that he was going to be moldy. A graceful figure walked past him, bringing with it a faint fragrance. Without looking up, Li Yi knew that it should be Lu Rui who had just taken a bath after dinner. It was her favorite perfume. "Follow me," Mississippi Lu said lightly and walked out of the door. Seeing that she went to the newly built stable to get the horse, Li Yi was stunned for a moment, and then he immediately showed a trace of joy on his face. Was she finally going to teach him how to ride a horse? Li Yi had been thinking about this for a long time. In just a moment, he came to himself and hurriedly chased after her. In this life, including his previous life, he had only ridden a horse twice. No, it should not be said to be riding. The first time was when Fang grabbed him to lie on the horse, and he fainted because of the bumpy ride. The second time was when he was still pressed on the horse by him, and it was still bumpy all the way. After getting off the horse, he held the willow tree by the moat and vomited for a long time. At that time, he secretly swore in his heart that he must learn how to ride a horse if he had a chance in the future. Although he might not be able to ride a horse in fine clothes and travel to the ends of the world with a sword, at least he would not be embarrassed when he encountered such a thing in the future. The horse that Li Xian gave him was indeed a good horse. It had a wide forehead, big and bright eyes, bright and full of expression, big and straight hooves, and no messy hair on its body. Li Yi had seen in a book about horses that a horse that looked like this could be regarded as a hero among horses. Of course, the most intuitive way to distinguish it was that after Lu Rui commandeered the horse, she did not intend to return it to him. After passing through the stockade village and walking for a while, he could see a flat grassland. When Li Yi walked over, Mississippi Lu was waiting for him there with the horse. Chapter 189. When Li Xian ordered the servants of the prince's mansion to send the horse over, the saddle and other supporting facilities were very complete. Try to get on the horse first. Seeing Li Yi walking over, Lu Rui handed the reins in her hands to him. Li Yi took the reins from her hands and looked a little dazed. Just like that. He had read those books about riding. Before getting on the horse, shouldn't one first familiarize himself with the horse and then try to get on it so that the horse wouldn't be scared and put himself in unnecessary danger? Forcing himself on the horse, it didn't seem right. If the horse went crazy after he got on it, it would be a tragedy. Li Yi didn't think that he could subdue a crazy horse with his current strength. This horse is docile, it won't be dangerous. Lu Rui seemed to see through his thoughts and said calmly. Being looked down upon by Mississippi Lu, as a man, of course, he couldn't show his timidity. Li Yi grabbed the reins and the mane at the root of the horse's neck. He stepped on the pedal and with a little force, he flipped himself over. He was no longer a weak scholar now. This set of movements was smooth and elegant. However, before he could sit firmly on the horse's back, the horse let out a long neigh and jumped high with its front hooves. Li Yi lost his balance and fell backward. Fortunately, he had some skills now. He held the reins firmly and clamped his legs tightly on the horse's abdomen. The falling momentum slowed down and his body stabilized again. He thought that this posture must be very cool. It would be great if someone could take a picture from afar so that such a cool posture could be preserved forever. While he was thinking, a white shadow soared into the sky and landed steadily on the horse's back behind him. Lu Rui slapped the horse's abdomen. The horse let out another long neigh and actually quieted down. Seeing that the fellow under him had finally calmed down, Li Yi heaved a sigh of relief in his heart, but his face was a little dark. This horse actually knew how to bully the weak and fear the strong. If he were to ride on it, it would want to throw him off its back. If it were Lu Rui, he would be as obedient as a grandchild and would not move at all. Wasn't he looking down on them? Hold the reins tight and clamp the horse's belly. Lu Rui reminded him and patted the horse's belly lightly. Li Yi then realized that this guy who bullied the weak and feared the strong started to trot. Riding on a horse was not as comfortable as Li Yi had imagined. The ride was very bumpy. In his previous life, he had even gotten dizzy from taking public transportation. However, the problem of carsick did not seem to be brought to this place, so he did not feel much discomfort. Lu Rui was explaining the technical essentials of horseback riding to him in detail, but Li Yi was not in the mood to listen. The space on a horse's back was originally small, so it was a little crowded for two people to ride on it. Even if Lu Rui deliberately kept a distance from him, their bodies would inevitably touch each other due to the bumpy ride. Feeling the soft feeling on his back from time to time, Li Yi was surprised. This little girl usually looked like she did not show anything, but in fact, she was quite sexy. He had underestimated her in the past. Then, he, who was not uncomfortable at first, gradually began to feel uncomfortable. Do you remember what I said just now? Lu Rui asked after telling him all the important details. Ah, what? Li Yi came back to his senses and then remembered that he did not remember a word of what Lu Rui told him just now. Lu Rui frowned slightly and realized that his mind was not on this at all. Just when she was about to speak, the horse suddenly stopped. She subconsciously tightened her grip on the horse's belly, but her body still leaned forward a lot. Her whole body was lying on the back of Li Yi. Feeling the softness on his back, Li Yi was a little stunned. He was sitting in front and saw an irrigation ditch in front of him. He thought that the horse would stop soon, so he was prepared and did not lose his balance. But then, Lu Rui's body pressed tightly against him. There was only one thought in his mind at this moment. Before today, he really underestimated her. This sudden situation was also unexpected for Lu Rui. When she realized that her chest was pressed tightly against Li Yi's back, she thought that along the way just now, it seemed that a rare trace of embarrassment appeared on her cold face. The next moment, she jumped off the horse's back. When the feeling on his back disappeared, Li Yi felt a sense of loss. He pulled the reins, and the horse suddenly turned around. When Li Yi looked up, he could only see a white shadow floating into the distance. "Where are you going?" he shouted. The shadow paused for a moment, then disappeared even faster. "Wait a minute, come back, at least tell me how to get off the horse." After a while, when the white shadow completely disappeared from his sight, Li Yi stared blankly in that direction and murmured, "It's still separated by clothes, it can't be." He sighed and took one of his feet out of the stirrup. Just when he was about to jump off the horse suddenly jogged forward. Li Yi almost fell off the horse. He quickly retracted his feet and clamped his legs tightly on the horse's belly. He could not help but curse in his heart, "This bastard, he's here again." From afar, he saw a group of naughty children rolling on the other side of the grass. Li Yi shouted loudly, "Lu Xiaohu, go and get your sister Rui to come over." It was Lu Xiaohu's first time seeing a teacher riding a horse. After a moment of shock, he nodded his head and ran in the direction of the village. When Lu Xiaohu called for help, Li Yi was still lying on the back of the horse that was running around. Lu Rui was stunned at first, then she jumped over the horse's back and easily grabbed Li Yi's shoulder, bringing him down from the horse. At the same time, she held the horse's reins with her other hand. The horse still wanted to run around, but it could not break free from the reins in her hand. After Lu Rui glanced at it, the horse that was running around immediately calmed down. Since ancient times, it had always been the hero saving the beauty. Today, the beauty saving the hero. Li Yi looked at the horse that had calmed down in Lu Rui's hands. He had some doubts in his heart. Did this guy have intermittent mental illness? Did he go crazy as long as he was alone on the horse? He no longer wanted to ride a horse. He heard that horse meat tasted pretty good. He wondered how it would taste in hot pot. Would it taste better than mutton? If there was a chance, he must try it. His first attempt at learning how to ride a horse ended in failure. Lu Rui's beautiful eyes were filled with doubt. Just now, Rui said that she would teach Li Yi how to ride a horse, but now there was no trace of her. However, she had always been like this since she was young. She did not have the patience to do things. Next time, it would be better for her to teach him personally. After tying the horse back into the stable, Li Yi saw Xiao Huan walking over with a bundle of straw. He called out to her. "Son-in-law, what's the matter?" The servant girl looked up at him. "Put the straw back first." "Why?" The servant girl blinked her big eyes and looked at him. "Right now is the time to feed the horse. Let's starve it for 3 days first." A trace of anger appeared on Li Yi's face as he said through gritted teeth. Chapter 190. Xiao Huan had always been obedient to Li Yi's words. Although she was still puzzled as to why the son-in-law wanted to starve the horse for 3 days, she knew that the son-in-law was right, so she put the horse straw back. Lu Rui walked in from outside and watched as the servant girl walked back with the straw in her arms. She asked, "Xiao Huan, has the horse been fed?" The son-in-law said to starve it for 3 days. The servant girl shook her head and said, "Give me the straw. You can go back to your work." Lu Rui took the straw from her hands and walked towards the stable. "Oh," the servant girl responded. She looked at Lu Rui's back as she left. The son-in-law didn't allow her to feed the horse, but second miss insisted on feeding it. What if the son-in-law was unhappy? Forget it. She didn't want to think about it anymore. She would let the son-in-law and second miss solve this matter themselves. Thinking that she hadn't fed her little rabbit, the servant girl shook her head. She took some fresh vegetables from the kitchen and walked into the inner courtyard. When Lu Rui walked into the stable with the straw, Li Yi was squatting on the soft ground in front of the stable. He was holding a brush and a piece of white paper. He seemed to be making a rubbing of something. The sound of footsteps came from behind him. Li Yi stood up and when he turned around, he saw Lu Rui walking over with the straw. Li Yi saw that there was nothing wrong with her expression. The straw didn't look like she was hiding a weapon, so he felt slightly relieved. After all, what happened on the horse was purely an accident. It had nothing to do with him. Although Mississippi Lu didn't have a good temper, she wasn't an unreasonable person. She didn't draw her sword and cut him, so she probably wouldn't take revenge later. However, just in case, it was better to confirm it first. He looked at her warily and asked, "About what happened just now?" "I didn't, shut up." Lu Rui pretended as if nothing had happened. She did not want Li Yi to mention this matter. A trace of blush appeared on her pretty face again. She threw the straw into the food trough and glared fiercely at Li Yi before turning around and leaving. This time, Li Yi was finally relieved. It seemed that Mississippi Lu really didn't intend to care about this matter. However, it was the first time that he saw her blushing pretty face. The heroine of a generation turned into a shy little girl. Li Yi really couldn't adapt to it in a short time. In the stable, the crazy horse that bullied the weak and feared the strong was eating the straw and snorting. Li Yi raised his head and glanced at it. This time, for the sake of Rui, he would let it go. If it didn't know what was good for it next time, he would starve it for 3 days first. Otherwise, it wouldn't know how many eyes the Horse King had. With white paper and a brush, he drew the horse's hoof prints according to the real size on the soft mud around the stable and ordered some horseshoes from the blacksmith. Although this horse didn't give him much face, it was undeniably a good horse. It would be a pity if the horseshoes were worn out. The blacksmith's craftsmanship was good. Li Yi told him the requirements and got 4 horseshoes the next day. Out of professional habit, the blacksmith didn't ask Li Yi about the use of these things. He had been a blacksmith for many years, so he certainly knew the rules of the trade. Fong held 4 strange things in his hand and asked in confusion, "Young master, what are these for?" "Horseshoes." "What's this thing?" The doubts on Fong's face were deeper. "What is horseshoes?" Listening to the name, this thing seems to have something to do with horses. However, Fong has the experience of raising horses and is no stranger to things related to horses, but he has never heard of horseshoes. It's the shoes for horses to wear. There are no horseshoes in this world, so it's no wonder that Fong has no knowledge. Li Yi explained to him. "What?" Fong stopped suddenly and couldn't believe his ears. He looked at Li Yi and asked, "Horses need to wear shoes?" "After living for decades, I only know that people need to wear shoes, but I have never heard of horses wearing shoes." "Isn't this a joke? We both run on the ground. You need to wear shoes. Why don't horses need them?" Li Yi looked at him and asked. Fong wanted to scold, "Nonsense," but he held it back before he could say it. "Walking barefoot without shoes will grind your feet. Stepping on stones will hurt you. Horses don't know pain, so why wear shoes?" Fong said confidently. He suspected that the young master was bewitched today. He suddenly wanted to put shoes on horses, and would he have the idea of beating cows and sheep in a few days? "You also know how to grind your feet. Horses run much more than you do. After a long time, the horse's hooves will be worn out, and the horse will be useless." Fong was stunned for a moment and said, "Young master, that's unnecessary. That horse only runs back and forth between the prefectural city and the stockade every day. It's only a few miles, and the worn-out hooves will grow back. But, according to what you said, the war horses in the army are often used, and the speed at which their hooves grow can't keep up with the speed at which they're worn out, so it's necessary to wear shoes." This time, Fong understood what Li Yi meant. He used to raise horses and knew that horses had to be used in moderation. If a horse was tied in the stable all day and not taken out to run, the horse's hooves would grow deformed. If it ran for a long time every day, the horse's hooves would be worn out. The former could still be saved, but the latter could only become useless. The young master's method was very good. After his reminder, Fong already understood that this strange thing probably needed to be nailed to the horse's hooves. Although the horse at home couldn't use this method, if the warhorses in the army had this treasure, they would no longer have to worry about the horse's hooves being worn out. After listening to Fong's words, Li Yi was stunned for a moment. He only remembered that in the novels he read in the past, the protagonist invented horseshoes and immediately shocked the emperors and ministers. They would exclaim that such a simple method had never been thought of before, and they would be rewarded with money and an official position. He subconsciously thought that all horses should be nailed to the horse's hooves. After listening to Fong's words, it seemed that he really made an unnecessary move this time. However, since the horse's hooves had been nailed, it would be a waste of the money paid to the blacksmith if he didn't put it on the horse. 2 days ago, this guy had lost face in front of Rui. Later, he would ask the yamen runners to help tie this guy up and nail the horse's hooves. Presumably, this guy who bullied the weak and feared the strong had never seen such a situation. It was scared half to death. If it still behaved atrociously in front of him next time, he would eat horse meat hot pot in front of it. When Li Yi and Fong went down the mountain this time, they deliberately brought the horse down to nail the horse's hooves. In the open space not far from the county yamen, with the help of Fong, the yamen runners easily put down the horse and tied it up with its hooves facing the sky. The huge horse's eyes were full of fear and it let out a long neigh. However, its 4 feet were tied up and there were so many people around it that it couldn't struggle even if it wanted to. When Fong was about to nail the horse's hooves according to the method Li Yi said, a voice suddenly came from behind. "What are you doing here?" A woman wearing a yamen runner's uniform walked over. Chapter 191. "Hey, it's you, arrestor Li." Fong knew that the female arrestor in the yamen was not an ordinary person. Li Yi had also specifically warned him not to provoke her. Fong stopped what he was doing, turned around, and explained with a smile, "Young master said that if we nail the horse's hooves, we won't have to worry about the horse's hooves being worn out." Mingzu watched as the yamen runners held down the horse. The man who had been following Li Yi stuck a strangely shaped iron piece on the horse's hooves one by one and fixed it with iron nails. He stood there and fell into deep thought. The maintenance and replacement of horses in the army cost a lot of money every year. More than 90% of horses were scrapped because their hooves were too worn out. Without hooves, horses naturally could not charge and break through enemy lines. Over the years, no one had thought of solving the problem that had troubled generations of emperors and ministers with just a few small iron pieces. After the iron pieces were nailed on the horse's hooves, the yamen runners dispersed. The horse immediately stood up and was led by Fong. It kept spinning on the spot, and the horse's hooves stepped on the bluestone slabs, making a clear sound. Anyone with a discerning eye could see the use of the iron pieces at a glance. After the iron pieces were nailed on the horse's hooves, the horse's hooves would not be in contact with the ground. This way, the horse could avoid being worn out. It only needed to change the iron pieces after a period of time. From then on, the imperial court would not have to worry about the huge amount of horse expenses every year. The service life of a warhorse would be greatly extended. In the long run, how much money would be saved? Mingzu was different from Li Yi and Fong. She was the princess of a country. When she thought about problems, she would often think from the perspective of the country. In a short moment, she thought of these things. It could be said that the contribution of this small iron piece had surpassed all the previous contributions, including writing rules for disciples, teaching cardiopulmonary resuscitation, and that novel interrogation method. These were not the work of a day and night, and could not be compared to the direct benefits created by this iron piece. "Where is Li Yi?" She stepped forward and looked at Fong, her eyes slightly moving. In the county office." Fong felt guilty under her gaze, so he pointed to the county government and said, Li Yi was in the county government. All the work had been assigned to him. After sitting in the duty room for a long time, he felt bored and decided to go out for a walk. After all, the county magistrate was one of the most powerful people in Anxi County. How could he always sit in the yamen? The higher his official position was, the more he had to mingle with the people. Therefore, he planned to take a stroll on the streets and experience the hardships of the people. Of course, he could also take the opportunity to relax. Before he could walk out of the gate of the county government, he was blocked by Mingsu. "What's up?" Li Yi looked at her and cursed his bad luck. He should have left a long time ago. Normally, if he bumped into her at the yamen, nothing good would come out of it. "How did you come up with the idea to nail the iron under the horse's hooves?" Mingsu looked at him and asked. She was very curious. Why did he think of a problem that no one had thought of for thousands of years? Because if the iron is nailed, the horse's hooves won't be worn out. Li Yi said matter-of-factly. Mingsu was slightly stunned. His answer seemed to be nonsense, but after thinking about it carefully, it seemed to make sense. The difference was that he was the only one who had thought of this for so many years. Looking at the expression on Mingju's face, Li Yi knew that he might not be able to experience the hardships of the people on the streets today. As expected, after a while, he returned to the duty room and wrote down the manufacturing method of horseshoes, how to nail the horse's hooves, and how to change the horseshoe in detail. There was no concept of patent in this world. It seemed that this time, the invention of horseshoes was destined to be given to the country, and it was destined to be a one-way trip. Mingju's bad habit made Li Yi feel that his remaining value was squeezed out. He received a meager salary as a county magistrate, but he did great things that benefited the country and the people. The salary he received was seriously inconsistent with the value he created. The evil feudal society was more exploitative than the capitalist society. After Li Yi finished writing, Mingsu put the papers into an envelope. Without even saying a word of thanks, she disappeared in the blink of an eye. Li Yi shook his head and sighed. At the same time, he lamented that he had met the princess. Send this letter to the capital at the fastest possible speed and hand it over to Imperial Father personally. Not long after, in an exquisite courtyard in Qing and Prefecture, Mingsu handed the envelope to an armored man. Don't worry, Princess. I will definitely hand this letter to His Majesty as soon as possible. The guard of the princess's residence responded solemnly, flipped onto his horse, and quickly disappeared from sight. Just, how much more ability does he have? Mingsu muttered to herself as she looked ahead, her eyes slightly dazed. Lord Qin, why don't I give you 10,000 taels of silver and you solve the problem of changing warhorses this year? In the imperial study of the imperial palace in the capital city, a man with a square face and a dignified expression waved his sleeves and glared angrily at another person opposite him. The person opposite him laughed bitterly and said, Lord Yen, 10,000 taels of silver is not a small amount. Last year's disaster was severe and a lot of money was spent on disaster relief. This year, the taxes of a few provinces have been reduced and the national treasury is not full. Besides, a few days ago, the Ministry of War has already allocated 100,000 taels of silver. Now that Lord Yen is asking for 50,000 taels of silver, where do we have that much money to give you? The man frowned and said, that 100,000 taels of silver is the army's provisions and pay. Don't confuse it with this matter. Lord Yen, please don't make things difficult for the Ministry of Revenue. 10,000 taels of silver is the limit we can give. The Minister of Revenue looked at the man opposite him and showed no signs of relenting. The man huffed coldly and said, recently, the border has been in a state of emergency several times. Sooner or later, we will have to go to war with the Qi Kingdom. At this critical juncture, our Jing Kingdom doesn't even have usable warhorses. Don't tell me Lord Qin doesn't know the importance of this matter. Hearing this, the Minister of Revenue did not say anything else. He could not bear the consequences and looked pleadingly at Emperor Jing, who was sitting at the top. In the imperial study, Emperor Jing watched the two ministers of the Ministry of War and the Ministry of Revenue oppose each other. Neither was willing to give in to the other. He rubbed the space between his brows and felt a headache coming on. The cost of horses had always been an important expenditure. In previous years, perhaps it could be postponed. However, at this time, the border was in a state of emergency and could not be delayed at all. After some consideration, he decided to postpone other expenditures. The money that was to be allocated to the Ministry of War could not be skimped on. Just as he was about to speak, Changde, the chief housekeeper, pushed open the door and came in. He walked to his side and whispered a few words in his ear. "A letter from Emingsu." A trace of confusion appeared on his face and he said, "Let him in." "Read it." Changde said loudly to the outside of the hall. The guard of the princess's residence walked in from outside the door. After kneeling and bowing, he presented the letter in his hand. He had traveled day and night and changed horses several times at the relay station. Without any delay, he finally arrived at the capital. Emperor Jing opened the envelope and took out a letter written by Princess Yongle. After reading it, a trace of astonishment appeared on his face. Then, he hurriedly opened the few pieces of paper in the envelope and read them. The smile on his face gradually widened. "This Li is indeed my lucky star." Emperor Jing slapped the few pieces of paper on the desk and said with a laugh. In the hall, the two ministers looked at each other with confusion on their faces. Chapter 192. Cough, cough. In the end, Jing Emperor was suffering from asthma. Now that he had solved the difficult problem, he was happy and laughed a few times. However, he could not catch his breath and coughed violently. Changde's expression changed and hurried forward to support him. Jing Emperor stroked his chest. After a moment, his breathing finally calmed down. "Official Yen, you said that a large number of warhorses need to be replaced every year. Most of it is due to the wear and tear of the horses' hooves. What if there is a way to prevent the horses' hooves from getting worn out?" Jing Emperor smiled and looked at the Minister of War, Yen Bing. Yen Bing was stunned for a moment. He bowed and said, "Your Majesty, if there is such a way, the annual cost of warhorses can be reduced by more than 70%. He paused and said, "It's just that, since ancient times, countless people have tried to prevent the horses' hooves from getting worn out, but no one has ever succeeded." Yen Bing naturally knew that if the horses' hooves could be prevented from getting worn out, then there would be no need to spend so much on horses. However, the problem was that for so many years, people in the Ministry of War had been studying and trying to solve this problem. They had done countless experiments, but all of them had ended in failure. If this matter was really as easy as His Majesty said, how could no one solve it for so long? "Changde, show these to official Yen." Jing Emperor smiled and handed him the paper with the strange pattern. Yen Bing took the pieces of paper from Changde's hands, feeling very puzzled. From the looks of it, could it be that someone had really solved this ancient problem? Full of curiosity and doubt, he cast his eyes on the paper. The first thing he saw was a strange pattern in the shape of a semicircle. He stretched out his index finger and thumb to make a gesture, and then continued to read the words below the pattern. "Horseshoe." He murmured and read in a low voice, "Nail this on the horse's hooves to avoid direct contact between the hooves and the ground. There is no need to worry about the horse's hooves getting worn out. If the horseshoe is damaged, just replace it with a new one." As his eyes moved down, Yen Bing held the paper and stared at the pattern on the paper. He was stunned. It's so simple. At this time, he had forgotten that he was in the imperial study. His beard trembled and he couldn't help but say loudly, A problem that had troubled countless people for thousands of years could be easily solved with just a few small iron bars. Why hadn't he thought of this before? Moreover, after the hooves of the horses were equipped with iron bars, they would be able to adapt to even harsher environments. No matter how much gravel there was on the ground, as long as the hooves of the horses did not come into contact with the ground, they would not have to worry about the hooves being worn out or cracked. The safety of the cavalry and the warhorses would be guaranteed, and their battle strength would definitely rise to a new level. I don't know which hero came up with such a wonderful method, only using a few cheap iron bars. From now on, there will be no need to worry about the horses' hooves being worn out, and it can also save a lot of money for the national treasury. I congratulate your majesty. Yen Bing put away the paper and said excitedly. The Minister of Revenue saw that Yen Bing seemed to have changed into a different person. He didn't mention anything about the horse fairs at all. He was curious about the contents of the piece of paper. What could have made His Majesty and the Minister of War so agitated? I didn't expect that this time, he would solve a difficult problem for us, the ruler and the minister. Emperor Jing was in a good mood. He touched the short beard on his chin and said, I originally wanted to let him train there for a few years before transferring him to the capital. If I reward him again and again, I'm afraid that it will breed his arrogance. Forget it, I will remember this credit for him for the time being and calculate it all in the future. Changde naturally knew who the he that Emperor Jing was talking about was, but the two ministers were confused. They only knew that the emperor attached great importance to this person who had come up with the plan and seemed to entrust him with great power in the future. They just didn't know who this person was. After all, they had been the ruler and the minister for so many years, but they had never seen His Majesty attach so much importance to anyone. Li Yi had waited for several days, but Emingsu did not mention anything about rewards. Well, this time he had really worked in vain again. Perhaps she treated a few small iron bars as treasures. The emperor and the court did not care about them at all. This woman had long hair and short knowledge. She made a fuss when she saw a novel thing and made him look forward to it for nothing. He thought that the emperor would reward him with a few acres of land and a few bolts of silk. Then, he would not have drawn those pictures and written those words in vain. It seemed that he had thought too much. It was really boring in the yamen. He changed into casual clothes and leisurely walked out of the yamen without asking Fang to follow him. Qing and prefectural city was the center of Qing and prefecture's culture, economy, politics. Anyway, it was the center of everything. Except for festivals, it was usually very lively. Li Yi wandered on the street, inspecting the people. Along the way, he saw many acquaintances. The Liu family's candied haws had now taken root in the prefectural city. On every street, there were Willow Leaf Village villagers holding candied haws. Most of them were from the Liu family. Sometimes, when they saw Li Yi, they would warmly greet him. Every day, they only needed to hold a stick full of candied haws and stand there. They didn't need to shout or hawk their wares, and business would automatically come to them. Every day, they would bring back a lot of copper coins. Such an easy way to make money, they didn't even dare to think about it a few months ago. Although they still had to hand over half of the profits, which made them uncomfortable, the remaining half was enough for them to live a comfortable life that they didn't even dare to think about before. Fang and the others were the first to sell candied haws. For a period of time, the business was handed over to their wives or trusted relatives. Now, the supplies of Rui workshop were all provided by the prince's mansion. The workshops in the village had stopped, so they were all free. Sometimes, they would come here to have a look and supervise. As the earliest employees, they all had dividends from the profits of Rui dew and spirits. At the end of every month, they just had to sit at home and count the money. When passing by Rui workshop, Li Yi stood at the door and looked around. There were many customers. At first, the girls were a little unfamiliar with this place. Now, they had taken care of everything here. He looked at it from afar and didn't go in. Next to Ri workshop was the wall market. Li Yi had been there once before. In ancient times, there was a lack of entertainment activities. Naturally, it couldn't be compared to the cinema or KTV in modern times. But now, he had no choice. Listening to a few songs and watching a few songs and dances was much better than sitting in the county government office and staring blankly. The wall market was very spacious. There were many temporary viewing sheds. They were very simple and were surrounded by railings. Inside, there were opera singers, dancers, and singers. After paying 10 copper coins at the door, one could enjoy the performances here. Of course, these viewing sheds were the lowest level of entertainment. Most of the people who gathered here were ordinary people who were not well off. In addition to these viewing sheds, there were theaters, tea houses, pubs, and even brothels. Of course, these places were more high-end and ordinary people couldn't afford them. The one that Li Yi went to last time was a larger-scale brothel. In terms of luxury, it couldn't be compared to those restaurants and brothels with green bricks and glazed tiles. But it was much better than those simple viewing sheds. "Sir, what would you like to order?" It was still the waiter from last time. When he saw someone coming in, he asked with a smile. "What do you have here?" Li Yi had drunk a lot of tea in the government office recently. Moreover, the tea here didn't taste good. He didn't plan to drink it this time. "Tea," the waiter said with a smile. "What else?" "Only tea." The waiter smiled a little awkwardly. Chapter 193. In the end, Li Yi still asked the waiter to serve him a pot of tea. He sighed in his heart that the manager of this brothel had no business sense at all. He was so bad at doing business. For entertainment places like this where people gathered, they refused to bring their own drinks. They just provided fruit drinks and popcorn. The price was a few times higher than outside, and they could earn a lot of money. If there was no popcorn, they could change it to a fruit platter, secret desserts, or even 2 skewers of candied haws. In the future, KTV did not rely on singing and drinks to earn money. If the service was more complete, they could keep the customers, and they would not be reluctant to spend money. He thought about it for a while and listened to the storyteller on the stage while waiting for the waiter to serve the tea. The storyteller was an old man. Li Yi had just entered in the middle of the story, so he did not know what the story was about. The few people sitting in the audience were listening enthusiastically. When they heard something exciting, they would throw a few copper coins on the stage. The old man smiled and told the story even more enthusiastically. At the crucial moment, the old man suddenly stopped and stood up. He said, "Ladies and gentlemen, today's story ends here. If you want to know what happens next, please listen to the next chapter." Just when the story was about to end, the old man's words made the audience unhappy. "You old man, why are you keeping us in suspense? Continue. I'm just listening to the story. What is this? Next chapter. Nonsense. I'll give you some more copper coins. Let's continue." The audience muttered a few words and took out the copper coins from their pockets and threw them on the stage. "Since all of you have spoken so highly of me, this old man will continue speaking." Seeing the copper coins on the ground, the wrinkles on the old man's face bloomed like a chrysanthemum. He had already stood up, but he immediately sat back down and cleared his throat. Let's talk about that. This old man's trick was quite common. Those storytellers or actors would stop a performance at the end of a show or at a critical moment. They would charge the audience and then continue their performance. This was very common in the brothels of Wa City. After all, the tips made up most of their income. In fact, the customers also knew the rules. Although they scolded them a little, they would still give them the tips they deserved. Li Yi was very disappointed that the old man did not leave. To be honest, the old man's story was dull and did not interest him at all. Originally, he thought that it would be good if the old man finished his story and changed to a good program to pass the time. He did not expect the old man's tricks to be so deep. Forget it, I'll just put up with it. Seeing this old man getting high here is much better than sitting in the yamen on duty. At the very least, I won't have to encounter the princess who has repeatedly tricked me. He looked in the direction where the waiter had left. That fellow's movements were really slow. It had been so long, and the tea still wasn't served. At this moment, on the side of the stand, a young girl poked her head out and looked at the young man sitting at a table not far away. Her pretty face showed a puzzled expression. She murmured, "Strange, isn't that the young man who sent Sister Ruoqing back that night?" She stretched her head out and was about to take a closer look when an ugly face suddenly appeared in front of her. The girl was so scared that her face turned pale. After taking a few steps back, she fixed her eyes on the face and said angrily, "Linda Bayo, are you trying to scare me to death?" The waiter clutched his stomach and said with a complicated expression, "Xiao Zhu, help me take this pot of tea to that young man over there. I think I have a stomachache." The waiter pointed at the teapot on the side and ran away after saying that. The girl patted her chest. She was really scared just now. She mumbled something before picking up the teapot and walking over. Li Yi was still thinking about whether he should complain about the waiter's efficiency later. He saw a girl about 15 or 16 years old come over and put a pot of tea on the table next to him with a slight smile. She said, "Young master, your tea is here." The waiter didn't come. The one who brought the tea was a girl with delicate features. Li Yi was slightly startled. Then he poured a cup of tea. After waiting for such a long time, he was indeed a little thirsty. The girl brought the tea, but she didn't leave immediately. She blinked her big eyes and looked at the handsome young man in front of her. She felt that he was very similar to the one who sent Sister Ruoqing back that night. However, it was too late at that time, and she didn't see his appearance clearly. Naturally, she wasn't too sure now. That night, she kept asking Elder Sister Ruoqing who that person was, but Elder Sister Ruoqing was unwilling to tell her. She had also never mentioned what had happened in the manor to her. Later on, she only found out about it from a familiar elder sister. She didn't know the details. She only knew that when those bad people bullied Sister Ruoqing, there was a young man who stood up for her. She should have seen him that night. After pouring the tea, Li Yi saw that the girl didn't leave. Instead, she stood there and looked at him with a strange expression. He asked doubtfully, "Little girl, what else do you want?" "I'm not a little girl," the girl said in her heart. She showed a sweet smile and asked, "Does this young man know Sister Ruoqing?" "Sister Ruoqing?" Li Yi was stunned. "You mean Miss Ruoqing?" She looked up at the girl in front of her and finally saw some familiar figures. Although she only took a glance, she still had some impression of the girl who opened the door. She said, "You opened the door that night, he, it really is you." The girl's pretty face bloomed with a smile. Knowing that the young man in front of her was Sister Ruoqing's friend, she became more relaxed and sat opposite to Li Yi. "My name is Xiao Zhu." "What is young man's name?" The girl heard about what happened in the prince's mansion that day from others. She had a good impression of the young man who helped Sister Ruoqing, so she took the initiative to talk to Li Yi. "Piglet." Li Yi didn't have time to tell the girl his name. He was surprised by the name, Piglet. How could such a lively girl have such a name? He didn't know what her parents were thinking. Although it was popular in this era to have a cheap name, but for a girl to have such a name, how much criticism must she have suffered since she grew up? The girl saw Li Yi's expression and knew what he was thinking. After all, since she was young, many people laughed at her because of this matter. Her real name was naturally not Xiao Zhu, but Qin Yuzhu. Only people who were familiar with her would call her that. Originally, she felt that this young man was handsome and familiar with Sister Ruoqing, so she was naturally closer to him. However, thinking that he actually misunderstood her name, the girl couldn't help but pout. Stupid young man, my name is Qin Yuzhu, the pearl of Zhuyu, not the kind with a long nose and big ears. She pouted and muttered a few words. Of course, the first 3 words were said in her heart. After listening to the girl's explanation, Li Yi realized that he misunderstood her name. In order to cover up his embarrassment, he took a sip of tea and asked, "When will this storytelling end? What's the next performance?" The girl wrinkled her nose and asked, "Is Grandpa's son's storytelling not good? It's just a so-so." The old man didn't have it easy, so Li Yi didn't belittle him too much and said casually, "Grandpa's son is the best storyteller in the brothel. His stories are also the most popular in the market. Many people like his storytelling. It's not ordinary." The girl was a little unhappy with what Li Yi said. Chapter 194. Grandpa's Son. Listening to the way the girl addressed him, she seemed to be quite familiar with the old man. However, although the old man's storytelling ability was very good, the story itself did not appeal to him. Li Yi looked at the girl and said, "Young lady, you have heard a few stories. Scholars devoted themselves to poetry and imperial examinations. Although there were novels and legends in this world, they were crooked ways, in their eyes. They were far from being prosperous. A few ghost stories could scare a large group of people." The girl was at most 16 years old. She had not heard many stories. It was very likely that she was fooled by the old man's words. "I am already 16 years old this year." The girl looked at him unconvinced and said. Of course, she was not convinced. The young master in front of her was at most 2 or 3 years older than her. Even if he was a scholar, she had grown up in a brothel and had heard many stories told by scholars since she was young. After so many years, how could she be convinced when Li Yi said in a childish tone, "How many stories have I heard at such a young age?" She had been trained as an actress since she was a child. After listening to stories for a long time, she was familiar with these routines. Even if she was asked to go up and say a paragraph now, it would not be a problem. Li Yi saw the stubbornness on the girl's face. He felt a little funny in his heart. He took a sip of tea and asked, "What stories have you heard?" "A lot." The girl curled her lips and said a lot of things as if she was showing off a treasure. Li Yi was a little surprised. He did not expect this girl to have heard a lot of stories. In order to kill time, he would sometimes buy some popular ghost stories on the market, novels and legends. However, after reading them a few times, he found that the content inside was dull and lacking in imagination. It was better to find books in the library. Of course, it might be because he came from the 21st century. His knowledge was much more than the ancient people here. There was never a lack of these in the library. The stories that circulated in the streets were novel enough for the people here. Among the books that the girl had just mentioned, many of them were inferior novels that he had seen in the market before. There were also some that he had never heard of, but this was not surprising. This world was similar to a parallel space. Although the historical trajectory before the Tang dynasty did not change much, the details were very different. Some famous people did not exist, such as Li Bai and Du Fu. There were also many unfamiliar names. As for the literary works, of course, they were different. The little girl's tone was filled with dissatisfaction, showing off, and contempt. However, in front of a scholar who only knew how to study, she indeed had the right to be arrogant. Looking at the proud expression on the girl's face, Li Yi smiled and asked, "Little girl, you've heard a lot of stories, of course. The girl's expression became even more proud, but after a moment, it froze on her face. Have you heard of the legend of the white snake? Li Yi looked at her and asked with a smile. White. Legend of the white snake. The girl was slightly startled, and gently shook her head. What about Journey to the West? A Chinese ghost story, painted skin. As the girl shook her head, she began to doubt her life. She thought that she was very familiar with the current popular stories, but she had not heard of any of the ones that Li Yi had just mentioned. She did not suspect that Li Yi had casually made these up to deceive her. Just by hearing the names, she knew that these were stories that she had not heard of. Painted skin, what is that? I have never heard of it. The girl's eyes turned, and she looked at Li Yi with her big eyes. They were not having a good time now. Whether it was storytelling or acting, they were all old-fashioned stories and scripts that lacked novelty. The number of spectators that they could attract was decreasing, and they urgently needed new stories or scripts to attract more customers. Otherwise, they might not even be able to maintain the most basic of living. However, good stories and scripts often sold for a very high price, and they could not afford to hire those talented storytellers. Just now, when she heard those unheard stories from Li Yi, the girl could not help but have ideas about him. Just now, Li Yi had said a lot, and the girl only remembered the last two, a Chinese ghost story and painted skin. Ghosts and whatnot sounded a little scary, and she was most afraid of listening to ghost stories. The girl pondered in her heart, and chose the other one. Li Yi took another sip of tea, and had no intention of telling a story. Every time he told a story, it was like a 3D movie in front of him, and the picture was especially strong. Last time, he wanted to tell a ghost story to scare Lu Rui, but he ended up scaring himself. He would not be foolish again. Seeing Li Yi's indifferent expression, as if he was unwilling to tell a story, the girl bit her lip, as if she had made a difficult decision. She took out a folded handkerchief from her pocket and placed it on the table in front. Li Yi looked at the bulging handkerchief, and he did not know what the girl wanted to do. The next moment, he saw her open the folded handkerchief, and said with some reluctance, "This is the osmanthus cake made by Sister Ruoqing. It is very delicious. Tell me a story, and I will treat you to this, okay?" Looking at the pastries on the table that emitted a faint fragrance, Li Yi could not help but swallow a mouthful of saliva. Osmanthus cake made by Ruoqing. It was really a nostalgic taste. Deal. Li Yi pinched a piece of osmanthus cake and put it in his mouth. The osmanthus cake in this season should be made with dried osmanthus and ground into powder. Although the taste was not as good as when the osmanthus bloomed, it was not much worse. The girl did not know that she had accidentally taken out a temptation that Li Yi could not refuse. Seeing that he was willing to tell a story, a smile bloomed on her pretty face again, and she hurriedly sat up straight. She thought that when he told the story, she must secretly write down the story and tell it to Grandpa's son later. That way, there would be a new story to attract customers. The Painted Skin was a very classic story in Strange Tales from Liao Zhai. There were many changes in modern movies and TV series, and some love and resentment were added. No one knew what kind of adaptation it had become. Li Yi could not find these scripts in the library, so he could only tell the original story of Pu Songling. Strange Tales from Liao Zhai was so popular in ancient times, and in this similar world, the effect should not be bad. Using it to scare people was also very good. Looking at the girl's excited expression, Li Yi could not help but have a little bit of wicked interest in his heart. A long time ago, there was a scholar in Qing and Prefecture called Wang Sheng. He went out in the morning and met a beautiful girl who was carrying a bag and hurrying on her way. Wang Sheng was puzzled. A weak girl was hurrying on her way before dawn. Could it be that she had some difficulties? He hurriedly followed her. The girl's face showed an expression of interest. So it is a story of a scholar and a beauty. It sounds good. Chapter 195. The woman said that her parents wanted to sell her to a rich family as a concubine. She couldn't bear it, so she secretly ran away. She didn't know where she wanted to go. Wang Xing saw that the woman was beautiful and traveled alone. He was tempted and invited her to his home. In order to see Rui's frightened expression, Li Yi had told her the story of the painted skin. Now he was familiar with it. He ate the osmanthus cake given by the young girl and drank a cup of tea to moisten his throat before continuing. The young girl had a general idea of what kind of story this gentleman was telling based on her years of experience listening to books. The scholar named Wang Xing helped the woman who was in a hurry. The woman was grateful and decided to stay at his house. The two of them spent a long time together and fell in love with each other. When Wang Xing was studying hard at night, the woman would stay by his side. Finally, her hard work paid off. Wang Xing went to the capital to take the imperial examinations and became the top scorer. He returned to his hometown in glory. From then on, the two of them lived happily together and became a story to be told. If the plot was even more bizarre, after Wang Xing became the Zhuangyuan, he was chosen by the princess or the daughter of the prime minister, and became the son-in-law of some high-ranking official. The woman waited at home every day, but there was no news of Wang Xing. So, she packed her luggage and traveled thousands of miles to the capital to act out the story of searching for her husband. She had heard stories like this since she was a child, and her expectations for the story told by the young man in front of her had dropped a bit. However, there was one thing that made her curious. The name of the story seemed to be Painted Skin. What did painted skin mean? Was Wang Xing's painting skills very exquisite? Wang Xing and the woman spent a few days together. One day, he was bumped into by a Taoist. The Taoist turned around and saw Wang Xing. He was very surprised and asked Wang Xing, "What happened to you recently?" Wang Xing shook his head and denied it. The Taoist said, "You have evil energy lingering around you. How can you say nothing?" Wang Xing tried his best to defend himself. The Taoist shook his head and said, "What a fool. There are people in this world who don't realize that death is at hand." After listening to this part, the young girl's expression became a bit confused. Wasn't he going to the capital to take the imperial examination? Why did the Taoist priest come out? What did he mean by "death is near"? This story seemed to be different from the stories she had heard before. Thinking of this, the girl's curiosity was fully aroused, and the expression on her pretty face gradually became serious. When Wang Xing returned home, he discovered that the courtyard gate was blocked from the inside, and he couldn't enter. He suspected that it was the person blocking the door, so he climbed over the broken wall and tiptoed to the window to peep. He was so scared that all his hair stood on end. He saw a ferocious-looking demon with emerald skin and long, sharp teeth, like saws. The evil ghost spread a piece of human skin on the couch and started drawing on it with a colored pen. After a while, she threw away the pen and lifted the human skin. Like shaking clothes, she draped the human skin over her body and turned into the woman who had been with Wang Xing day and night. Ah! When Li Yi reached this point, the girl's face turned deathly pale and she suddenly let out a scream, "Ghost!" Li Yi's voice stopped abruptly. He didn't deliberately stop at the exciting part to ask for a tip, but the girl's scream scared him. He had seen countless horror movies, so his imagination was much better than the people of this era. The image of the female ghost just now was like a 3D movie rolling in his mind. The girl's scream was like a surround sound effect added to the movie, so immersive that it couldn't be any more real. He glared at the girl, ate a piece of osmanthus cake, and drank a cup of tea to calm down. Oh my God! After the girl let out a scream, a man behind her suddenly jumped up from his seat, knocked his knees on the stool, and hurriedly squatted down, holding his knees and inhaling. "Little girl, what are you yelling for?" The man glared at the girl, grimaced in pain, and his tone was full of resentment. Just now, he was listening to the story attentively. The evil ghost actually painted on human skin, and after the painting was done, she could wear the skin to become a human woman, and the scholar even had sex with the evil ghost every night. Thinking of this scene, his heart was a little scared. This was too *King scary. Suddenly hearing the girl's ghost scream, he was scared out of his wits, and all the hair on his body stood up, and he subconsciously jumped up. That's right, listen to the story, don't yell blindly. Scholar, continue to tell the story. What happened to Wang Xing after he saw the female ghost? There were a few men sitting around the big man, and they were probably eavesdropping on Li Yi scaring the girl. He was kind enough to tell the girl a story, and they were startled by the scream just now. When they came back to their senses, they all urged. On the platform not far away, the old storyteller's voice became smaller and smaller, and a surprised look appeared on his face. Just now, the guests who were listening to his story, what did they do over there? He had already told an important story, and according to the usual practice, these people would be happy to hear it, and they would definitely give him money. But now, even the people were gone, so what if *King money was there to give? The old man looked at the scholar who was sitting there surrounded by people, and he couldn't help but frown. Could it be that this young man was sent by someone else to mess up the place? When he saw the guests slap the copper coins on the table in front of him, and there was even a piece of silver among them, the old man was even more determined in his heart. Snatching business here, those people were getting more and more overboard. Here, the reward is for you, continue to tell the story. After the first man put a few copper coins on the table, several people followed suit. The evil ghost painted on human skin. The story told by the scholar just now was much more exciting than the one told by the old man on the platform. Several people mistook him for a new storyteller, and when they took out their rewards, they were much more generous than when they threw money on the platform. Although the girl didn't put any copper coins on the table, she still looked at Li Yi with longing in her eyes. What about the rest of the story? For people thousands of years in the future, a horror story like The Painted Skin was simply too weak. The atmosphere of horror was far from comparable to those 3D horror blockbusters. But this was ancient times, and half of strange stories from a Chinese studio was enough to scare timid people into not daring to go out at night. It was said that when The Painted Skin was filmed in Hong Kong in the 60s, many people believed it to be real, and after watching it, they were scared to death. However, although it sounded scary, many people liked this kind of thrilling feeling. Li Yi couldn't understand this girl's behavior. She was obviously scared to the point that her face was pale, so why did she still want to listen? Even if she wanted to listen, he didn't dare to continue. When the 3D movie was playing in his mind, if she screamed a few more times like she did just now, Li Yi wasn't sure if his little heart could take it anymore. Being responsible for the young girl's young heart, and not letting her have some lingering trauma, Li Yi decided to stop here. I'll tell the rest of the story when I have the chance. Under the girl's stunned gaze, he stood up from his seat and packed the rest of the osmanthus cake to take away. After a few steps, he turned back and kept the copper coins on the table. Although the money was a little less, at least it was his own labor, and it was shameful to waste it. Chapter 196. The girl called Xiao Zhu watched as Li Yi took away the rest of the osmanthus cake along with her handkerchief. His figure quickly disappeared at the door, and the expression on her pretty face was somewhat stunned. The story was only told halfway, and it stopped at the most critical moment. Not being able to hear the rest of the story made people's hearts itch uncomfortably. This young master, he didn't keep his word. He clearly said that after eating her osmanthus cake, he would tell a good story. The girl clenched her fists, lightly bit her lower lip, and murmured in a low voice. Seeing the scholar take the reward and simply turn around to leave, the men who were attracted by the story of The Painted Skin were also dumbfounded. What the hell is this? Just as they were tempted by the storyteller ran away irresponsibly. Did he even consider the feelings of the audience? Why was this young scholar even more abominable than the old storyteller on the stage? Yu Zhu, who was that person? The old storyteller came down from the stage and walked to the girl's side. He looked in the direction of the door and asked. Although the story was not finished, there was no one here to listen to him. Originally, he wanted to come over and ask clearly, but he didn't expect that the disruptive scholar would run away so quickly. Before the girl had time to reply, the man who was frightened by her just now spoke first. Old man, don't tell the story you just told. Do you know how to tell the painted skin? Hurry up and tell us apart, and we will reward you. The man took out a copper coin from his bosom and slapped it on the table. He stared closely at the old man and said, Yes, that scholar just now was too unruly. He ran away halfway through his story, and it made people's hearts itch. Hurry up and continue from where he just left off. The old man's face revealed a stunned expression. He simply didn't understand what these people were saying. What did they want me to tell? What skin? How would he know what skin it was? Originally, he wanted to come here to listen to the music and watch the dance, but he didn't come at a good time. He met a chattering old man, and his only gain was these osmanthus cakes. The osmanthus cake made by Ruoqing was really delicious. The next time he met her, he would ask her how to make it and teach Xiao Huan when he went back. He could make more to take with him. In this era, there was no variety of snacks. If he was hungry in the county government, he could eat a few pieces to fill his stomach. Since he had nothing to do, he decided to wander around. This tile-roofed building could be considered a fairly large entertainment venue in Qing and Prefecture. It was an extremely wide square with all kinds of tile-roofed houses. Other than the large and small booths used for performances, there were also many merchants. On both sides of the square, a dazzling array of goods were displayed. Li Yi paused for a moment outside a few of the booths. There were singers, actors, people swallowing swords in their mouths, and people breaking rocks with their chests. It was a dazzling sight. It had to be said that the people in the city were more playful than the villagers in the Willow Leaf village. They knew how to find fun for themselves. Although it was still daytime, there were a lot of people gathered here. It was a good place to kill time. Li Yi visited a few more booths one after another. Looking at the sky, he estimated that it was almost time to get off work. After patrolling outside for so long, it was time to go home for dinner. On his way back, he passed by a certain brothel. The eyes of a girl who was standing at the door to receive customers lit up. She hurriedly took a few steps forward and grabbed his arm. "Child, come in and play." Her coquettish voice gave Li Yi goosebumps, and he hurriedly flung his arm away from her hand. The brothel here was not as high-end as the Jade Courtyard. There were no prostitutes to accompany you to recite poems and songs, talk about life and ideals. The purpose of men coming here was very simple, which was to satisfy their physiological needs. Li Yi had endured for more than 20 years in his previous life. He had only experienced a few months in this world, so his physiological needs were not so strong. Moreover, in any case, he could not give up his first time here. The heavily made-up brothel girl saw that the handsome young man in front of her didn't seem to have that kind of intention. She wanted to give up, but she was unwilling. It was very difficult to meet such an outstanding customer here. She simply clenched her teeth and said, "Young master, come in with me. I won't take your money." Although she was a prostitute and was in the flesh business, she would still be a little annoyed when she had to face those old and ugly patrons every day. If she could have sex with such a young gentleman, she would be willing to pay for it. No charge. Li Yi was shocked because of this sentence. It turned out that what Li Xian said last time was not a lie. He could really go to a brothel without paying for it. However, the situation now was a little different. This girl with shining eyes did not give him such a big discount because of some poems or essays. Most likely, it was because he had the potential to be a gigolo. He struggled out of the girl's hand as if he was escaping. The girl seemed to be very disappointed. In the end, she even showed that she wanted to pay for it. After apologizing repeatedly, Li Yi hurriedly left. He secretly sighed in his heart. The young ladies in this world are really passionate and unrestrained. After leaving Hua City, he was not in the mood to stroll anymore. When he returned to the county government, he directly went to the back office to ask Fong to go back with him. Your Excellency, Brother Fong went out to buy something. When Fong was not there, a Yamen runner ran over and said. Fong had nothing to do in the county government all day, so he became familiar with these Yamen runners. Usually, he called him Brother Fong. Forget it. When he comes back, tell him that I am going back first. According to Li Yi's understanding of Fong, after buying something on the street, he did not know how long it would take. He was too lazy to wait for him to come back. He rented a carriage and slowly drove out of the prefecture. At the same time, in the Willow Leaves village, Xiao Huan looked a little anxious. The little rabbit that was given to her by the son-in-law was lost. Why don't we go outside and look for it? Maybe it ran out because it was hungry. Lu Rui looked at her and comforted her. No, I just fed it this morning. Xiao Huan's voice sounded like she was about to cry. She had raised that rabbit for a long time and already had feelings for it. She felt very sad that it was lost for no reason. In the past, even if she let the rabbit out, it only moved around in the yard. Sometimes it would run out, but it would not run very far. After a while, it would run back on its own. But today, she had searched the yard and the surrounding area, but still found nothing. I still can't find it. Maybe it sneaked away. Lu Rui walked in from outside. She had expanded the scope of the search, but still couldn't find the rabbit. Although Xiao Huan was not very willing to believe it, she also knew that this rabbit was originally caught from outside. Maybe it also had its own family. If someone wanted to separate Xiao Huan from Miss and the son-in-law, she must be very sad in her heart. I hope the little rabbit can find its family. The little servant girl sighed and murmured. Child, should I still wait here tomorrow morning? The servant of the carriage sent Li Yi to the foot of the mountain. The mountain road was in front of him, and he asked before leaving. No need. Li Yi waved his hand. Last time when he nailed the horse's shoes, it seemed to be frightened and did not act wildly in front of him again. It obediently stopped jumping around. When he went out tomorrow, he could ride it. The servant drove the carriage back. Li Yi walked alone on the mountain road, thinking that there was still a long way to go back to the stockade village. He had to realize his dream of buying a big house in the city as soon as possible. Willow Leaves Stockade used to be a mountain bandit village. When building the village, it was natural to consider whether it would be easily destroyed by the troops sent by the government. On the way, there were rugged mountain roads. Some places could only allow one person and one horse to pass. It was easy to defend and difficult to attack. As a mountain bandit village, its location was not bad. But as a village, it was extremely difficult to go out, hiding in the deep mountains. It was also reasonable that several generations of villagers were so poor. County Magistrate Li, why didn't Fong Laosan follow you today? Li Yi walked through a dense forest. Suddenly, a sound came from the forest. He stopped in his tracks and looked up. He saw a person walking out of the forest and looking at him with a smile that was not a smile. Chapter 197. Wooing. Li Yi frowned when he saw the young man walking out of the woods with his hands behind his back and blocking his way home. Although he was not familiar with the person in front of him, he was definitely not a stranger. On the first day when he was caught by Lu Rui, it was this person who broke into the house with his second aunt. It seemed that he had been thinking about Rui for a long time. Li Yi had only met him a few times in the stockade village. Wu Ying's attitude towards him was not friendly. Wu Ying was the nephew of his second aunt. Although his surname was not Lu, he often came to the stockade village and was very familiar with the people of the Lu family. He could be regarded as half a member of the Willow Village. Meeting him here was beyond Li Yi's expectation. What he said just now seemed to have a hidden meaning. Li Yi heard a trace of malice from his tone. This malice was no longer just unfriendly. What do you mean? Li Yi looked at him and asked with a frown. You will know what I mean in a moment. Wu Ying showed a cold smile and strode towards him. Seeing that he came with bad intentions, Li Yi's face changed slightly. Rui had warned him a long time ago to be careful of Wu Ying. Wu Ying had been apprenticed to a powerful figure in the martial arts world and his martial arts skills could not be underestimated. Li Yi knew that even though he had been trained by Rui for a long time and was no longer a weak scholar, he was still far from being Wu Ying's opponent. He subconsciously drew out the waist knife that he carried with him. Although he knew that he could not beat him with a weapon, it was better than fighting with his bare hands. Wu Ying's lips curled into a cold smile. Li Yi raised his saber and slashed at him. Wu Ying's body swayed slightly and he easily dodged the attack. In the next moment, his figure disappeared before Li Yi's eyes. Li Yi instinctively felt danger, but before he could react, he felt a sharp pain at the back of his neck and then he felt everything go black. Shit. The last thing he could think of was that he regretted leaving alone without Fong, Lord County Lieutenant. Pooh! Wu Ying snorted coldly. A look of disdain appeared on his face as he spat on the ground. He bent over and put Li Yi on his shoulder. He picked up the saber that had fallen to the ground, turned around and walked into the dense forest behind him, gradually disappearing on the small path. In the Willow Leaf village, the little maid was sitting in the yard, still sad about the lost rabbit. Unknowingly, the sky had darkened. When she raised her head, she could already see the moon. Xiao Huan looked at the direction of the door and muttered, "Why is son-in-law not back yet?" According to the usual situation, the son-in-law should have reached home more than 2 hours ago, right? Could it be that there was a delay in the yamen? The little servant girl was distracted by this matter. At this time, Lu Rui walked out from the courtyard and asked in puzzlement, "Xiao Huan, is son-in-law not back yet?" "No." The servant girl shook her head, stood up and said, "I'll go ask Uncle Fong." Son-in-law had always been with Uncle Fong. If Uncle Fong did not come back, it should be that son-in-law was busy with something. In the past, he would occasionally sleep in the shop and not come back. Now, the little servant girl would not let her imagination run wild like before. Lu Rui nodded and watched Xiao Huan walk out of the house. She did not think much. Xiao Huan went out for a while and came back with Fong. "What, son-in-law is not back yet?" Fong looked at his sister Rui with a face full of puzzlement. The mutton at home was gone. Before he came back today, he went to the butcher's shop to buy some mutton for dinner. He left for at most an hour. When he returned to the yamen, the bailiff told him that son-in-law had already gone back. Fong had to go back to the stockade by himself. After returning, he did not come back to take a look. Just now, the stove at home had been set up and the charcoal was burning brightly. Fong was about to sharpen his chopsticks to eat the mutton when Xiao Huan came to ask about son-in-law. When he heard that son-in-law had not returned, Fong put down his chopsticks and hurried over. Could he be at Rui workshop? Lu Rui looked at him and asked. This was also a possibility. If he did not return to the stockade, he would most likely be sleeping at Rui workshop. Fong shook his head and said firmly, "That's impossible. I came back with the girls in the shop. Son-in-law did not go to the shop today." The worker at the cart shop also said that he saw son-in-law go up the mountain with his own eyes. How about I go to Uncle Han's place? Son-in-law often goes to Uncle Han's house recently. When the young maidservant spoke again, her pretty face was already filled with anxiety. I'll go. Hearing this, Fong turned and went out of the courtyard. Eldest Miss had asked him to protect son-in-law. Now that there was no news of son-in-law, Fong was also extremely anxious. If something happened to son-in-law, not only would he be ashamed to see eldest Miss, but Fong would also feel guilty. Moreover, son-in-law's disappearance this time was completely different from the last time. Last time, when son-in-law disappeared, Fong blamed himself, but it was not that serious. After all, if son-in-law ran away on his own, it was just that he did not keep an eye on him. But this time, son-in-law's disappearance was definitely not a possibility. Son-in-law has not been here for a few days. What's wrong? Son-in-law has disappeared. Uncle Han asked in confusion when he saw Fong's anxious face. Hearing this, Fong's body trembled, and the expression on his face became even more anxious. After gritting his teeth, he knocked on the door of another house. What, son-in-law? I don't see him. How could son-in-law be here? I don't see him. What happened to son-in-law? After knocking on almost all the doors in the stockade, hearing these people's answers, Fong's face gradually turned pale. At the same time, in a shack in a remote mountain forest, the eyelashes of a young man lying in the corner trembled slightly. His neck hurts. This was his first feeling. In the past, he had only seen it in movies. Those experts only needed to chop the back of a person's head, and the person would immediately faint. This time, he had experienced it for himself. So he could really faint. Apart from the pain in his neck, he also felt a little dizzy. He raised his head and began to look around. This was a semi-enclosed space, probably similar to a shack. It was built with some simple wood. There was nothing in the shack, and the outside was covered with hay. It was extremely simple. At the moment, he was in a corner of the shack. His limbs could move freely, and he was not tied up with a rope. The waist knife was casually thrown beside him. It seemed that Wu Ying was quite confident in him. But thinking about it, through the small confrontation just now, Li Yi understood the difference between the two of them. Although he did not have a clear understanding of how powerful Wu Ying's martial arts were, there was one thing that was unquestionable. Even if he had a knife, he would only be killed in a second. Now was not the time to think about how powerful Wu Ying's martial arts were. Thinking of a way to escape was the most important thing. Usually, the bad guys that he met would at least be reasonable. Encountering this kind of guy who would fight at the slightest disagreement, Li Yi was also very helpless. Other than a little pain in the back of his neck and some discomfort in his abdomen, the other parts of his body did not feel any discomfort. He tried to stand up from the ground. At this moment, a figure walked in from the outside. You woke up so quickly. Faster than I thought. Wu Ying looked at him coldly and said mockingly. Tell me, what do you want? Li Yi patted the dust off his body and replied indifferently. I thought that Rui chose a trash. I didn't expect that you really have some guts. Wu Ying looked at him and frowned. He still had a mocking tone. He thought that after this scholar woke up, he would definitely cry and beg for his life. He did not expect that he would have such an attitude. He was just a weak scholar. Where did his confidence come from? He did not answer Li Yi's words. He looked at him and said, Do you know, since I was very young, I had already decided to marry Rui. Speaking of this. His eyes suddenly became sinister. That night, if it wasn't for Rui stopping me, I would have really killed you. Li Yi patted the dust off his clothes, tightened his sleeves, and said indifferently, and then? Could it be that this was the reason why he kidnapped him? Since he did not hide his true face at all, it seemed that he did not intend to leave him alive. Some people in this world were really King crazy. Of course, now she is no longer worthy of me. Wu Ying's expression was a little disgusted. He looked at Li Yi again and said, "Hand over the formula of Rui Du and liquor, and I will spare your life." Li Yi twitched the corner of his mouth. This kind of words could deceive others, but not him. According to the plot of the TV series, whenever a bad guy said such words, he must be thinking of killing immediately after getting the secret. It turns out that it's just for the formula of Rui Du and liquor. You should have said it earlier. Why bother? He waved his hand and said, "Rui Du and liquor are actually the same thing. The key is how to purify the alcohol. The equipment for purifying alcohol is a bit complicated. You can't understand it if I explain it like this. How about I wait for you here? You go back and get a pen and paper. I'll draw it for you." Wu Ying sneered and said, "Do you think I'm stupid? If I leave, will I still see you when I come back? That's your fault." Li Yi's face showed shame and annoyance, as if he had been greatly insulted. He walked in front of Wu Ying, pointed at his nose and said, "A scholar doesn't lie. I said I'll wait for you here, so I'll wait for you here." Buzz. Before his voice died away, a light sound came from his sleeve. A black light spot quickly enlarged in Wu Ying's eyes. "Thank you, Uncle Han." Li Yi thought to himself. Chapter 198. It's all my fault. If I hadn't been greedy and went to buy meat, the son-in-law wouldn't have met with an accident. Fong grabbed his hair, his eyes bloodshot as he spoke with extreme self-blame. Now is not the time to talk about this. The most important thing is to find the son-in-law. A man dressed in coarse clothing patted his shoulder and instructed the people beside him, "Since the worker from the carriage shop last saw the son-in-law at the foot of the mountain, let's follow the road up the mountain and look. Something might have really happened. Perhaps we'll meet the son-in-law halfway. Brother Su is right." Another man hurriedly added, "Perhaps the son-in-law suddenly remembered that there was something he had to do when he went up the mountain and returned to the prefectural city. How about this, you guys look along the road first. While the city gates are not closed, I'll go to Rui Square and the county yamen to take a look. If there's news of the son-in-law, I'll come back to inform you immediately." These men were the ones who had worked by Li Yi's side in the beginning. From Fong's anxious expression and words, they could guess what had happened. At this moment, 3 to 5 people discussed for a moment and hurriedly left the stockade village. They followed the mountain road and looked all the way down. Fong's eyes became even more bloodshot. After looking back at a certain courtyard, he rushed down the mountain. "Second Miss will definitely find the son-in-law." Night had completely fallen. A figure stood at the doorway and looked down the mountain as she murmured. She didn't hear the second Miss's reply. When she turned her head again, a fine horse rushed out of the courtyard and crossed the threshold. Under the bright moonlight, the figure of the woman on the horse quickly disappeared from her sight. "A scholar doesn't lie. I said I'll wait for you here, so I'll wait for you here." Wu Ying watched as the scholar walked in front of him, pointed at his nose, and said such words. A mocking expression appeared on his face. This scholar must have really studied so much that he had become stupid. He was delusional enough to use such words to deceive him. Just as this thought appeared in his mind, a buzzing sound suddenly came to his ears. Then, a strong sense of life and death suddenly came. A black speck of light shot out of the scholar's sleeve and rapidly enlarged in his eyes. Wu Ying's expression changed drastically, and he subconsciously reached out to grab it. However, the reason why Li Yi had walked so close to him just now was so that he wouldn't have time to react. The last thing Wu Ying saw was an expanse of blood red. "Ah!" A shrill voice suddenly came out from the shack. Wu Ying held the arrow in his eye with one of his hands. His facial features were all twisted together, and the expression on his face was hideous and terrifying. The improved sleeve crossbow made by Uncle Han couldn't be fired consecutively, and Li Yi didn't think he could finish off Wu Ying in one go. After hearing the sound of the crossbow, he lifted the waist knife under his feet into his hand and stabbed forward. Puff! It was the sound of a sharp weapon cutting through flesh. Wu Ying held the hidden dart in his eye with one hand and tightly gripped the blade with the other. Blood dripped down. Li Yi's blade was finally blocked by him. You deserve to die. He suddenly raised his hand. Li Yi's hand shook, and the waist knife in his hand flew out. Wu Ying hit his abdomen with a backhand palm. Li Yi only felt like being hit by a fierce beast. He spat out blood from his mouth and hit the wood of the shack. The pain in his abdomen was unbearable, as if his internal organs were displaced. After hitting Li Yi with one palm, Wu Ying had already rushed over again in the next moment. Watch the arrow. Li Yi suddenly raised his sleeve. The previous arrow was still stuck in Wu Ying's eye. Seeing this, his expression changed. His whole body flipped in the air strangely and fell heavily to the side, dodging. He didn't hear the sound of the bowstring. Li Yi's forehead was full of cold sweat. He covered his abdomen, leaned against the shack, and sat up with difficulty. He waved his hand at Wu Ying and said, "Don't be nervous, I'm just kidding you." "You're kidding me." The expression on Wu Ying's face became more ferocious. He picked up the long knife beside him and walked step by step towards Li Yi. "Don't worry, I won't let you die so easily." According to his original plan, after forcing the Rui Du's formula from the scholar's mouth, he would immediately kill him, regardless of whether he was a county officer or not. From then on, he would escape thousands of miles away and let him roam freely between heaven and earth. Not only would he get his revenge, but with the Rui Du's formula, no matter where he went, he would not be short of money. At that time, he could have as many women as he wanted. Why would he still think about Lu Rui? However, he didn't expect that the other party was just a weak scholar who could kill him with one hand. Naturally, he let down his guard, and then he failed miserably. Who would have thought that this scholar could shoot arrows from his sleeve? If he didn't look down on him and checked carefully, he wouldn't have ended up like this. It was too late to say all this now. The sharp pain had caused his consciousness to become a little fuzzy. That I might not be able to stay. No matter how regretful he was at this time, it would be of no use. Once he had forced the formula out of him, he would definitely try thousands of punishments on him to take revenge for this arrow. After taking 2 steps, Wu Ying's legs suddenly went soft and he knelt on the ground. It's finally working. Li Yi wiped the sweat off his forehead and let out a long sigh of relief. At this time, Wu Ying's hand no longer had the strength to hold the knife, and his body fell straight down. Wave after wave of strong tiredness hit his mind. Relying on a tenacious willpower, he spoke with difficulty. I put poison on the arrow. Li Yi slowly moved to his side, picked up the waist knife beside him, and placed it on his neck. Brother Wu, goodbye. Wu Ying held the knife handle and wiped it gently. His remaining eye suddenly opened wide. Don't worry, I will burn the formula of Rui Du for you when I get back. I hope there are no transmigrators in the hell of this world. After saying this, Li Yi seemed to have exhausted all the strength in his body, and his whole body went limp next to Wu Ying. Thanks to Uncle Han's craftsmanship, thanks to the powerful knockout drug used by Dainyu and his wife, and thanks to the formula of the floral water, Wu Ying didn't use the knife at the beginning. There was a tingling sensation on his thigh. When he reached out to touch it, it was sticky. He was afraid that it was stung by a branch just now. There was also a big hole in his clothes. He sat up with his hands, tore off a strip of cloth, and made a simple bandage. Only then did he turn to look at Wu Ying. This guy was simply a psychopath. On the first day after transmigrating, he was taken back to the village. Was this his fault? Just for such a small matter, did he have to risk his life? Damn it, did he still care about the law? Even martial arts masters would die if their necks were slit. A dead martial arts master, even if he didn't care about the law, would not be so terrifying. However, it would be disgusting. One of Wu Ying's eyes was pierced by a sleeve arrow, and it was already soaked in blood. The other eye was wide open, as if it was about to burst out of its socket. His throat was cut, and blood flowed on the ground, vomit. As a person of two lives, it was the first time that Li Yi saw such a scene. In particular, all of this was done by him. When his life was hanging by a thread just now, he didn't feel anything, but now he couldn't bear it. Li Yi turned his head and retched on the spot. At this time, under the cold moonlight, on the path leading to the shack, a few strong figures were approaching. Chapter 199. Their footsteps were steady and unhurried. From time to time, they would step on the dead branches on the ground and make a crisp sound, startling the birds that were resting in the forest at night. With a flapping sound, they flew deeper into the night. Big brother, we're almost there. In the distance, they saw a dark shadow lurking in the forest like a giant beast. The person walking in front stopped and said in a low voice. Another few dozen feet in front of them was the shack that Wu Ying and the others had agreed on. Big brother, do you think that Brother Wu will be able to succeed? A man with a long face glanced at the shack and whispered, Big brother, do you think that Brother Wu can succeed? It is said that the person is only a weak scholar. Brother Wu's martial arts are not bad. Even if the three of you work together, you might not be his match. I'm afraid this matter is foolproof. The person that the long-faced man called Big Brother was a tall man with several crisscross scars on his face. He said in a deep voice. That's true. With Brother Wu's skills, there shouldn't be any mishaps. I just don't know if you will be able to get the Ruidu formula out of him. I heard that the formula is very valuable. The long-faced man nodded. Hee, fourth brother, why are you worried about this? Those scholars are the most cowardly. Let's first cut off one of his hands and one of his legs. Let's see if he wants his life or the formula. A knife-wielding man next to the long-faced man heard this and curled his lips in disdain. The four of them had killed people for money many times in the past few years. No matter how tough a person was, after a few cuts, they would spill everything that should and shouldn't be said. When the four of them committed the crime, they did not clean up the mess and were targeted by the government. They fled to Qing and Prefecture and met Wu Ying by chance. After getting to know each other, Wu Ying revealed some things to them. With the cooperation of the four of them, today's matter came about. Let's hurry over. If Brother Wu doesn't hold back and torments the scholar to death, our efforts today will be in vain. The long-faced man urged. He wasn't worried about the scholar. In the past, the four of them had encountered a similar situation. Once, they had interrogated a rich man about the location of his treasury. In the end, they were too heavy-handed. Before they could get the answer, the rich man had already died, causing them to waste their efforts. This Brother Wu had never done such a thing before. It was said that he had a lot of personal grudges with that scholar. If they killed him before they could get the formula out of him, then their dreams of getting rich would be shattered. Fourth bro is right. Let's hurry over. Among the four of them, the thin man who had been silent all this while spoke up and took the lead to walk towards the shack. The other three followed closely behind him. In the shack, Li Yi almost threw up his gallbladder. He no longer looked at Wu Ying's body. His thigh was burning with pain, and the place where Wu Ying's palm hit his abdomen was even more painful. Most of the reason he vomited just now was probably because of that palm. He had heard from Rui that after practicing martial arts and cultivating jinchi, a light palm hit a person's body. On the surface, there would be no wound, but in fact, the internal organs would have been destroyed by the jinchi. Li Yi felt that he was in this state now. That bastard Wu Ying's palm just now was not light. Previously, when he saw Fang and the others send people flying with one punch, he felt that it was quite exciting. After experiencing it himself, there was only unspeakable pain. Just now, he lifted up his clothes to take a look. There was already a bruised palm print there. He didn't know if he had suffered some internal injuries. After resting for a few minutes, his head began to feel dizzy again. At this time, he began to understand why Li Xian always brought so many guards with him when he went out. If he came back with Fang today, he wouldn't be in such a miserable state. He stood up with some difficulty. He didn't look at Wu Ying, who was lying on the ground again, and walked straight outside. Only God knew if Wu Ying had any accomplices. To deal with Wu Ying, he had used all his skills and almost died. Not to mention another person who knew martial arts, it would be difficult for him to deal with an ordinary person now. "Brother Wu, we are here." A rough voice came from outside the shack. Li Yi's footsteps stopped. Damn, what did I say came? Li Yi cursed in his heart and held the knife in his hand tightly. "Brother Wu." Seeing that there was no sound coming from inside, the long-faced man asked again. "Come in." This time, there was a sound coming from inside the shack. "Did you catch him?" The long-faced man's face showed a trace of joy as he walked into the shack. The moonlight shone through the gap of the shack. He couldn't see the situation inside clearly. The long-faced man could only see a figure squatting there. As for the ground, he could faintly see a person lying on the ground. "How was it? Did you get the formula?" The long-faced man was most concerned about this question. He strode over. "I wasn't careful and killed him." The next words of Brother Wu caused the big man's expression to change. What? What he worried about had really happened. The scar-faced man quickly walked over. "Let me see." He directly squatted down beside that Brother Wu and wanted to see the corpse. At this time, there was suddenly an explosive sound coming from behind. "Old Four, be careful." The long-faced man was lying on the ground. He heard his big brother's familiar voice. When he was about to turn around, a cold long knife was already on his neck. "Don't move." The slightly muffled voice suddenly became clear. "Brother Wu, you." The long-faced man was shocked and angry. He slowly turned his head. Just as he was about to question that Brother Wu, his face changed again. You are not Brother Wu." As if he had thought of something, he suddenly looked at the corpse on the ground. With the help of a few rays of moonlight, he saw a small arrow stuck in one eye, and the other eye was wide open. Wu Yingshi was already dead, and his face showed an expression of extreme disbelief. That scholar, the weak scholar that they thought had actually killed Wu Ying. It was precisely because he was extremely confident in Wu Ying's martial arts skill that he was worried that Wu Ying would not be able to capture the person, worried that he would use a heavy hand to kill the scholar, but he had never worried that Wu Ying would fail miserably and fall into the hands of the scholar. Therefore, when he entered the shack, even though he felt that Brother Wu's voice was a little different today, he was only slightly puzzled. He did not think about it in any way. But the scene in front of him proved that his previous worries were all for naught. There was blood on the knife. It was likely that Wu Ying had died under this knife. Looking at the calm scholar, the long-faced man felt a chill from the bottom of his heart. At the entrance of the shack, the three men looked at the scene in the shack with a face full of disbelief. Wu Ying was dead. Old Four had a knife on his neck. Was this the weak scholar that Wu Ying had mentioned? "It's very uncomfortable to squat down. Please cooperate and stand up." As the few of them were shocked, the scholar's voice came over. Chapter 200. Gulp. The long-faced man's throat moved, and a thin layer of sweat appeared on his forehead. The ice-cold long saber was placed on his neck, and with just a little bit of force, a very fine line of blood seeped out. He didn't dare to delay, and slowly stood up. Don't be rash. Let's talk. The long-faced man's voice trembled as he hurriedly said. Wu Ying's neck had clearly been cut by someone. He didn't want to be lying on the ground in the same position as him in a moment's time. After all, he and Wu Ying didn't have much of a friendship. They were only using each other out of mutual benefit. He didn't want to avenge him and didn't want to die with him. He only hoped that the scholar wouldn't be rash. At the entrance of the shack, the three of them looked at each other and slowly moved inside. The three of you, get out. The scholar had already stood up. The long knife was still pressed against the fourth disciple's neck as he looked at the three of them. The three of them had no choice. After a pause in their steps, they slowly retreated. The fourth disciple was still in the scholar's hands. If they acted rashly and angered him, the scholar's hand would shake and the fourth disciple's head would be gone. They could only follow his wishes and temporarily retreat. The scholar seemed to have suffered serious injuries and probably wouldn't last much longer. At this moment, the three of them were shocked and depressed. When Wu Ying had first told them about this scholar, his tone had been nonchalant and extremely disdainful. He had taken on everything by himself. As long as the four of them came here at night and forced the formula out of the scholar's mouth, they would immediately form a group and escape from Qing and Fu. If they encountered soldiers, the five of them working together would have a higher chance of escaping. Unexpectedly, they had come according to the agreement, but Wu Ying had kicked the bucket. He would never be able to fulfill the agreement and had died at the hands of the weak scholar he had spoken of. He had even dragged the fourth disciple down. Thinking of Wu Ying's description of the scholar, the three of them cursed in their hearts at the same time. Maldif *Ker, was this really a scholar who didn't even have the strength to truss a chicken? After dealing with Wu Ying, he was still able to calmly pretend to be him and hold the knife against the fourth disciple's neck. Who was the fugitive here? At this moment, the fugitive in their hearts was holding a long saber, his face extremely pale. A deep sense of exhaustion entered his mind, and Li Yi bit the tip of his tongue, instantly becoming more clear-headed. 4 people. Including the horse-faced man who was temporarily held hostage by him, there were a total of 4 people on the other side. In a one-on-one fight, he was definitely not a match for any of them. If he hadn't used the cover of the night and pretended to be Wu Ying to deceive this man, he would have fallen into the tiger's mouth right after escaping from the wolf's claws. Why did he always meet such a bastard? What happened to the protagonist's halo? The current situation was actually not optimistic. Although he had used this man to temporarily restrain these people, he still could not escape. He did not have the physical strength to hold the knife against the man's neck while walking back. Thinking of this, he suddenly felt a chill under his feet. He looked down and saw that his left foot was only wearing a sock. He did not know when he had lost one of his shoes, but he did not notice it earlier. He sighed softly. Even though the situation was not optimistic, he still could not give up. He bit the tip of his tongue again to wake himself up a little. Now, there was no need to rush to leave. He needed to recover some of his physical strength first so that he would have the strength to negotiate with these people later. Otherwise, when his body could not take it anymore, he would inevitably have to face another tragedy. Although the formula of the Ruidu was important, it was more important to stay alive. Big brother, is that scholar really going to slit the fourth disciple's neck? Outside the shack, the tall man holding the knife looked at the scar-faced man and asked worriedly. No, that scholar is a smart person. He would not understand that if he killed the fourth disciple, he would not be able to escape. Before the scar-faced man could speak, the thin man spoke first. That's right. The scar-faced man said in a deep voice, if he wants to live, he will not touch the fourth disciple. Although I do not know how he killed Brother Wu, he seems to have suffered quite a serious injury. With the fourth disciple's intelligence, nothing serious will happen to him. We can just wait here. I think it will not be long before he comes out on his own." Before the scar-faced man could finish his words, the expressions of the three changed at the same time and they looked in the direction from which they came. Under the moonlight, a faintly discernible shadow was rapidly approaching. "Who is it?" The three of them turned at almost the same time. The shadow's speed was extremely fast. In the time of 2 breaths, the three of them saw a fine horse galloping in their direction and a young woman on the horse. The woman held a small piece of cloth in her hand. She flew down from the horse and looked ahead coldly. In the middle of the night, in the wilderness, there was actually such a woman. The three of them were extremely surprised. "Hee, big brother, second brother, could it be that the heavens know that we brothers are lonely at night and have specially sent us a beauty to relieve our boredom?" The man holding the knife was stunned for a moment. Using the moonlight, he saw the woman's face clearly. A lustful smile appeared on his face and he walked towards the woman. Although he did not know why the woman would appear here, the reason was not important. What was important was the result. The horse found its way here and did not advance any further. The woman held the piece of cloth she had picked up on the mountain path in her hand. When she looked at the shack in front of her, she paused for a moment. Among the withered branches and withered leaves on the ground, a shoe appeared out of place. Under the moonlight, it looked extremely out of place. The smell of blood, the faint smell in the air made her heart sink. "Where is Li Yi?" She raised her head and looked at the man who was walking towards her and asked coldly. "Li Yi." When the man holding the knife heard this, he was stunned for a moment. Then he remembered that this was the name of the scholar that Brother Wu had mentioned. So this woman had come to find the scholar. What a coincidence. If he could capture her, the scholar would no longer be a threat to the fourth brother. Moreover, this woman looked. When he thought of this, an inexplicable smile appeared on his face. "You're talking about that scholar. He's dead." He looked at the woman and said, "In my opinion, you don't have to look for that scholar. Which one of us brothers isn't thousands of times better than him? He's dead." This sentence kept echoing in the woman's ears. Her body trembled and her face instantly turned pale. In the end. "I'm still too late. Third brother, capture her first. We'll talk about other things later." The calm man said aloud. The third brother had always been a lustful person and had made many mistakes in the past. This woman's appearance was strange. It was most important to first capture her and use her to threaten the scholar. "I say, second brother, why are you always so rude? Don't be rude to this beauty. Look at her little face." The man who was called the third brother put down his knife and a teasing expression appeared on his face. He reached out to touch the woman's pretty face. "He's dead. Why are you still alive?" At this moment, a cold and emotionless voice suddenly rang in his ear. The man was stunned. In the next moment, a white light flashed in front of him. His eyes suddenly widened and he covered his throat with both hands. He struggled to breathe, but it was all in vain. Blood flowed out from the gaps between his hands and his body fell straight to the ground with a dull thud. Chapter 201. The sword light was as fast as lightning, and the sword cut the throat. It was only when the man's corpse fell on the ground covered in withered leaves that the scar-faced man and the calm man slowly came to their senses. Under the moonlight, the man whose throat was no longer bleeding had his eyes wide open. Even in death, he could not understand why the woman who was just a plaything in his eyes had become the king of hell who took his life in the blink of an eye. Third brother. Seeing their brother die tragically under the woman's sword, but they didn't even have the time to stop her. They didn't even see how she had attacked. After the scar-faced man recovered from his daze, his face revealed an expression of extreme grief and indignation. He let out a low roar, drew out the long saber at his waist, took a few steps forward, and slashed at the woman. This move was made with all his strength, and even the air made a sound like it was ripping silk. Before today, it was unknown how many people had been cut in half by this large saber. Behind him, the man who had always had a calm expression finally showed a look of shock and anger. After the scar-faced man made his move, his figure instantly moved, sealing off the woman's path of retreat. In the face of the saber coming at her head, the woman did not dodge. Only when the saber was about to fall, the surrounding moonlight seemed to brighten. Inside the shack, Lee looked outside. There was only the faint shadow of the trees under the moonlight, and he couldn't see clearly. His line of sight to both sides was blocked by the shack. If he hadn't been hallucinating just now, there should have been a moment of noise outside, as if there had been the sound of weapons clashing, but it quickly returned to silence. Could it be that the three of them were fighting among themselves? Fight, fight, fight. It would be best if all three of them were injured. That way, he wouldn't have to think about how to escape. His right hand gently pulled back, and then he would go home and do what he had to do. With such a malicious thought in his heart, a strong wave of dizziness came over him. His body swayed, and he almost didn't have the strength to hold the saber. At this moment, the long-faced man, who had been waiting for an opportunity, suddenly tilted his head and avoided the blade. His body rolled forward and immediately rolled out of the shack. After escaping from that scholar's clutches, there was no longer a knife on his neck. He laughed wildly twice, thinking that once he got the formula for the Ruidu, he would definitely chop off that scholar's head with his own hands. After roaming the Jianghu for so many years, this was the first time he had encountered such a life-and-death crisis. The feeling of having a knife at my neck scared me to death. At the critical moment of life and death, he rolled quite a distance until his body collided with something before he finally came to a stop. The long-faced man was about to use his hands to support his body and stand up. After reuniting with his three brothers, he would go in and deal with the scholar. Suddenly, he felt that the place where his palms touched was a little wet. It had not rained these days, and the ground was abnormally dry. This shack had been their temporary hiding place, and there was no water source nearby. Damn it, could it be that third bro is peeing everywhere again? Thinking of third bro's past bad habits, the long-faced man cursed angrily. He felt a little disgusted and rubbed his hands on the ground in disgust. What he felt was a kind of warm touch. He looked down and saw third bro's eyes filled with endless fear. He couldn't help but shiver. At this moment, his hand was placed on third bro's face. He turned his palm over and saw a dark brown substance. How was this water? It was clearly blood. Third bro, his face revealed a frightened expression. He reached out his hand and touched third bro's nose. His whole body couldn't help but shiver. Dead. The moonlight was very bright that night, and one could clearly see several feet away from them. Two familiar figures were lying on the ground a few steps away, just like third bro. They were in different postures, but they were both very quiet as the dead. Eldest bro, second bro. He cried out in fear. His heart was filled with fear. It was also at this time that the sound of light footsteps came from behind him. Under the night sky, a ray of light that was even brighter than the moonlight flashed by. The woman's face was expressionless. She held a blood-stained sword in her hand and looked coldly at the shack not far away. There's another one. In the shack, there was an indistinct breathing sound. It was very weak. She walked over and looked inside the shack. In the darkness, there was a figure lying there. There was no sound, and it was likely that he had been dead for a long time. Her footsteps paused. The short road in front of her seemed to be separated by thousands of mountains and rivers, making it difficult for her to move forward. There was no sound coming from outside for a long time. Finally, the sound of footsteps came to a stop. Li Yi held the knife in his hand. He had already bitten the tip of his tongue countless times, and he was barely able to stay conscious. It's over. I'm afraid I'm really going to die here. At this moment, he was truly at the point where he was at the end of his rope. If he waited any longer, he was afraid that his body wouldn't even need to wait for those people to come in. Suddenly, the sound of footsteps came again. Li Yi hid at the side of the shack. When he saw the shadow on the ground flash in through the door, he stabbed the knife in his hand. Even though the enemy was strong and he was weak, he still had to try. What if those people walked in one after the other and were caught off guard? What if he skewered them with his knife? The ideal scenario didn't happen. The knife was clamped by two slender and fair fingers. Li Yi looked at the woman who was emitting a faint glow under the moonlight. After a slight shock, he threw the knife away. Finally, you. Rui. He heaved a long sigh of relief and opened his arms. I missed you so much. His body fell straight to the ground. So fragrant, so soft. His last consciousness disappeared. Lu Rui hugged him. The coldness on his face finally disappeared. He looked up at the sky. The moon tonight was so beautiful. The corpse in the shack was not his. When Lu Rui walked over, she could vaguely tell that the person who had died a horrible death was Wu Ying. He had been shot blind in one eye, and the fatal wound was from the knife that had slit his throat. One was a scholar who was not even considered a weakling. The other was a martial arts master who had reached a higher level. The four people outside were all good at martial arts too. Her pretty face was a little dazed. After a while, she leaned him against the wall of the shack and carried him on her back. She walked out and disappeared into the night. On the mountain road, Fong, who was holding a torch, shouted until his voice was hoarse. Along the way, there were spots of fire. Those were the people who were looking for Li Yi. A horse neighed from the forest. Fong turned around and with the help of the fire and moonlight, he saw a familiar figure on the horse. Second young mistress. He ran over in big steps. When he saw the person on Lu Rui's back, his body trembled. His face was wild with joy. He said suddenly, "Young master has been found." Lu Rui nodded. "Send someone back to inform them. We'll return to the prefecture immediately." "Yes." Fong nodded vigorously. The big stone in his heart was finally lifted. He ran toward the fire in front of him. Chapter 202. After asking a man to go back to the village to report the news, Fong didn't delay and once again rushed towards the direction of the prefectural city. Lu Rui carried Li Yi, who had lost consciousness, on the horse. In order to avoid bumps, he didn't go very fast, but he could still arrive before the city gate was closed at night. Fong burst out at full speed. The first thing he did when he arrived at the prefectural city before her was to kick open the door of Huichun Hall. Huichun Hall was a medicine shop not far from Rui's workshop. It also served as a medical center. The shopkeeper of the medicine shop was a doctor with decades of medical experience. Last time, in order to buy medicine for the girl picked up by the son-in-law, Fong and the imperial physician went to Huichun Hall once. Compared with the polite knocking last time, the method this time was obviously more violent. The old doctor was still calculating the accounts in the hall. Suddenly, the door of the medicine shop was kicked open and a strong man rushed in from outside. He thought it was a thief and was so scared that he almost couldn't breathe. After taking a closer look, he found that the man was the one who came with Imperial Physician Lu last time. Before he had time to speak, he was carried on the shoulder of the man and ran out. Hearing the noise, the apprentice of the medicine shop ran out from the back hall. Just when he ran into the hall, he saw Dr. Chin was taken away by a strong man. After a moment of daze, there was a panicked shout. "Doctor, how is it?" Seeing Dr. Chin withdraw his hand from feeling the pulse, Fong grabbed his arm and asked hurriedly. In Rui's workshop, Lu Rui also stared at Dr. Chin. Don't worry. Just now, he was carried on the shoulder of Fong and ran all the way, so Dr. Chen's heartbeat had not calmed down. After a while, he said, the county magistrate's injury is not light this time. The injury on the leg is a small matter. After applying some wound medicine from the medicine shop, it will not be a big problem. But the palm on the abdomen is probably a serious internal injury. Although it is not life-threatening, it will take a long time for him to completely recover. Although the man's rude behavior made him very unhappy, this Dr. Chin was still able to distinguish the importance of the matter. Let's do it this way. I'll write a prescription that focuses on nourishment and supplements it with medicine. The effect will be better this way. While Physician Chin was writing the prescription, Fong fiercely punched the wall and angrily said, "That bastard Wu Ying. If I ever meet him, I'll tear him apart." He had just learned from the second miss that the son-in-law was kidnapped by Wu Ying. In his heart, Fong had already cursed all the female members of his family. Wu Ying is dead. Hearing the doctor say that Li Yi's life was not in danger, Lu Rui was relieved. He looked at Fong and said calmly, "Ah." Fong was stunned for a moment and subconsciously thought that it was the second miss who did it. He said with some regret, "It's really lucky that he didn't fall into my hands." Lu Rui didn't explain. She looked at the slightly frail figure lying on the bed again. Wu Ying could already be regarded as a master who had reached the next level. She knew better than anyone else how strong Li Yi was. Even 10 of him wouldn't be a match for Wu Ying. But in the end, Wu Ying died in his hands. Before she arrived, for men with good skills couldn't do anything to him. The man with the knife scar on his face wasn't any weaker than Wu Ying. She had to admit that this time, the image of him in her heart was somewhat changed. When Li Yi opened his eyes, the sunlight outside penetrated through the window. It was slightly glaring, and it took him a while to adjust to it. It was a very familiar bed, a very familiar room, and the Hello Kitty hanging on the wall was still smiling at him. Everything indicated that he should be in Rui's workshop now. In that case, the moment when he was at the brink of despair last night, the faint radiance of the moon goddess that he saw was not an illusion. Thank the moon goddess, thank Rui. It's good to be alive. From the angle of the sunlight, it should be late now. He had changed into a clean set of clothes and the wound on his leg was bandaged again. Although his body was still very weak, the dizziness from yesterday was gone. He tried to support his body and sat up. There was a clang sound at the door. The copper basin in Xiao Huan's hand fell to the ground. After being stunned for a moment, she immediately screamed and ran out. Son-in-law is awake. Li Yi could hear her voice from inside the room. The result of the scream was that not long after, the room that had only been him a moment ago was immediately filled with many figures. Hee, everyone is here. The expression on Li Yi's face was a little awkward. Seeing that Li Yi had woken up, Fong and the others were finally relieved. After saying a few words, they all left the room. For a moment, only Li Yi and his family were left in the room. Lu Rui helped him to sit up from the bed and said, I have already asked Uncle Fong to pass the message to the yamen. My husband, just stay here and recuperate. You don't have to worry about other things anymore. I have just stewed chicken soup. Have some, my husband. Dr. Chen said that nourishment was the most important thing for his injury. Lu Rui picked up a bowl from the side and put a spoon to his mouth. Let me do it myself. Li Yi hurriedly reached out to take the spoon. After growing up, He ate everything by himself and had never been fed by anyone. This kind of life was too corrupt. He could not guarantee that he could resist the temptation of the evil feudal society after becoming a pioneer. If he was not careful, he might fall into depravity. While drinking the soup, she asked about what happened last night, and Lu Rui also listened by the side. By the way, when we go back, I have to thank Uncle Han properly. Li Yi put down the spoon, and his face became slightly solemn. If it was not for Uncle Han who helped him make the sleeve crossbow according to the blueprint, he would not be lying here now, but lying in some remote wilderness. He was able to successfully kill Wu Ying because of the sleeve crossbow. Of course, there was also the powerful knockout drug that he got from Dainyu. His soul came from the 21st century. To be honest, it was very difficult for him to accept killing someone. But when it really happened, he could not care less about these things. If Wu Ying did not die, he would be the one who died. Lu Rui nodded. In this case, Uncle Han could be considered to have indirectly saved him, so naturally, she would not mistreat him. She was just cooking when she was called in by Xiao Huan. At this moment, seeing that Li Yi was in good condition, she told him to rest well and left the room. This time, I didn't embarrass you, did I? Li Yi turned to look at Lu Rui, and a smile appeared on his face. To a certain extent, he could be considered as Mississippi Lu's direct disciple. In the future, when he went out to travel in the martial world, he would not bring down her reputation when he talked about this matter, not really. Lu Rui glanced at him, and the ice on her pretty face melted. Chapter 203. He was seriously injured this time. Rui said that Wu Ying used concealed strength in that palm. If he hadn't avoided the vital parts by chance, he wouldn't have been able to hold on until now. Even so, that palm had hurt his lungs. After a night's rest, his body was still weak and he couldn't exert much strength. The feeling of being idle and bored was very uncomfortable. He wanted to go out for a walk. Although he was weak, he still had some strength to walk. However, Rui didn't allow it, so he had to lie on the bed and rest. There were several thin books at the foot of the bed, most of which were novels. They were bought on the street. He was bored at that time, so he just turned a few pages and didn't touch them. In fact, he only needed to think about what kind of book he wanted to read now, and the content of the book would appear in his mind by itself. There were no books in this world in the library, and he didn't need to buy them specially. After touching them, the same book would appear in his mind like copying and pasting. It was just that others couldn't see or touch it. However, he would get tired of it after a long time. If there was nothing urgent, he would rather hold a physical book in his hand and read it in the sun. It was a feeling that was hard to get rid of. Xiao Huan was afraid that he would be bored in the room alone, so she brought a small stool in and sat by the bed to chat with him. She talked about the missing rabbit. The second miss rode out to look for him, and the horse found him because it smelled the young master's scent. The horse's nose was really more sensitive than that of a dog's. It made a great contribution this time, so he should feed it more horse fodder when he went back. While the maid was talking, Fong came in from outside and told Li Yi that people from the county government came. They were County Magistrate Liu and County Magistrate Wang. County Magistrate Liu had just returned from the crime scene. It was a major case involving 5 lives. As the county magistrate, he had rushed over as soon as possible when such a serious case happened in the jurisdiction of Anxi County. Is County Magistrate Li all right? As soon as County Magistrate Liu entered the room, he walked to the bedside and asked with concern. He had known that County Magistrate Li was kidnapped by bandits, but he didn't have time to come here until the murder case was more important. Li smiled and said, "Thank you for your concern, Lord Liu. It's no big deal. I'll be fine after a period of rest. It's just that I'm afraid I'll have to delay my official duties during this period." County Magistrate Li, take a good rest and don't worry about official business. I will arrange all these. County Magistrate Lu waved his hand and said. Thank you, Lord Lu. Li Yi cupped his hands. County Magistrate Lu said some polite words and asked about Li Yi's well-being. Then he looked at Li Yi and asked, I heard that County Magistrate Li was kidnapped by those villains yesterday. Do you know how those villains died? Thinking of the scene he had just seen in the wilderness, County Magistrate Lu felt a chill in his heart. 5 lives. They had already investigated 4 of them. They were bandits wanted by the neighboring prefectures, and they had a lot of cases on hand. Some time ago, they fled to Anxi County. County Magistrate Lu had just received the official document from the Ministry of Justice. He only hoped that those guys would leave as soon as possible and not commit any more major crimes under his jurisdiction. Then, as expected, a major crime happened. The difference was that this time, the bodies of the 4 vicious bandits were exposed in the wilderness, and they looked very frightened, as if they had encountered something terrible when they died. Looking at County Magistrate Lu, Li Yi said solemnly, to be honest, after being knocked out by those villains yesterday, it was already late at night when I woke up in the wilderness. I thought I couldn't escape, but I don't know why those people all died suddenly. Maybe they had an internal strife and died together. County Magistrate Lu stared at him for a long time and said, I'm afraid that's the only possibility. Those villains deserve to die. As long as County Magistrate Li is safe, it's fine. Although he said so, he didn't believe it at all. The 4 people were all killed with one blow, and there was no sign of struggle or resistance before they died. Or it could be said that the people who killed them didn't give them a chance to resist at all. It couldn't be caused by an internal strife. The dead man in the shack was blind in one eye, and his throat was slit. The blood-stained knife on the ground was County Magistrate Li's knife. When County Magistrate Lu looked at the smiling young man on the bed again, he suddenly felt a chill from the bottom of his heart. This case had come to an end, those villains deserved to die, and those who killed them not only didn't do anything wrong, but also made meritorious service. As for the man in the shack, he was a famous ruffian in Anxi County, who intended to murder an official of the imperial court, and also died in an internal strife. County Magistrate Li survived the disaster and escaped from the villains, which was a great fortune and misfortune. Good people lived long, and bad people died. This was the best ending. In this way, this case could be closed. County Magistrate Li is not feeling well, so I won't bother you anymore. Due to the need of the case, County Magistrate Lu asked some details about how he was kidnapped. As for other things, he kept silent, seeming to believe that those people were killed because of internal strife. Not long after that, he naturally said goodbye to Zhang Tai. I'm not feeling well, so I won't see you off, Lord Lu. Seeing County Magistrate Lu and County Magistrate Wang walking out, Li Yi recalled the words revealed by County Magistrate Lu and County Magistrate Wang, and understood his attitude. Although he was a victim, it was a case involving 5 lives after all. If it was investigated further, it would be a little troublesome. This time, he owed County Magistrate Lu a favor. Thinking of what happened yesterday, he was still a little depressed. He didn't offend anyone, but he met Wu Ying, that pervert, and almost died again. If Rui didn't come yesterday, would he travel through time again? Are you okay? Lying on the bed in a depressed mood, a familiar voice came from the door. Li Yi glanced at Mingzu angrily. If he had been tied with more gauze, he would have become a dumpling. Did he look okay? Bring everything in. Mingzu turned around and said. Then, 2 people carried a box in. What's this? Li Yi looked up at him. It's the precious medicine in the palace. It's useless to put it aside. You can keep it. After the 2 people put down the box, they left. Mingzu walked in, followed by a white-haired old woman, who looked at Li Yi lying on the bed with her turbid eyes. What happened yesterday? Seeing that his face was a little pale, but it seemed that he was not seriously injured, Mingzu didn't worry anymore. She walked to the bedside and asked. Don't mention it. I met a lunatic. Li Yi didn't want to continue this topic. Lunatic, you mean wooing? Mingzu looked at him with a little curiosity. She looked at him and asked, how did you kill him? With her identity, it was only a matter of a word for her to investigate the identity of the dead in the shack. What she was curious about was that wooing was a little famous in Anxi County and had good martial arts. Excluding the possibility of a sneak attack, it was almost impossible for an ordinary person to blind his eyes from the front. Could it be that wooing deliberately got in front of him for him to shoot? Moreover, even if he was blind, he wouldn't be killed so easily by an ordinary person. But in the end, even though there were too many strange things, he was still killed in the end. Although we are close, I can still sue you for slander if you talk nonsense like this. Li Yi was shocked. He looked at her and said loudly. Chapter 204. The girls of the old Li family didn't have any major problems other than cheating others, drinking too much, and not being good with words. Just now, they were talking about his injuries. Suddenly, they made a sharp turn and asked him how he killed wooing. This caught Li Yi off guard. Internal strife. That's internal strife. Li Yi looked at her and reminded her, when I woke up, they were all lying on the ground. Other than internal strife, what else could it be? As for who killed wooing, how would I know? Since they haven't been dead for long, let's find some Taoist priests and monks to summon their souls. Maybe we can get the answer out of them. Hee, little boy, you're full of nonsense. Before Mingzu could say anything, the old woman behind him sneered and said. Those 4 guys' kung fu was excellent. They had committed many murders and fled to various prefectures. Who knows how many soldiers were killed by them, but all of them had their throats slit with a sword. They didn't even have the chance to resist when they died. It can be seen that the person who killed them was a master swordsman. Even if he hasn't reached the level of a grandmaster, he's still one of the best in the world. One of the best in the world. From the old woman's mouth, Li found out that Rui's kung fu was so powerful. While he was thinking, the old woman suddenly bent her fingers into claws and tried to grab his head. What are you doing? Her sudden action startled Li Yi and he instinctively reached out to block it. But the old woman suddenly retracted her claws and shook her head, saying, It's really not. Clang. The sound of a long sword being unsheathed came from the door. The old woman suddenly turned her head halfway through her words. Who are you? Lu Rui pointed his long sword at the old woman from afar, his face full of vigilance. The old woman and Li Mingzhu looked at the sword in her hand with a thoughtful expression on their faces. Could it be this little girl? The old woman murmured. Her figure suddenly flashed in the direction of Lu Rui. Although she was old, her speed was amazing. With Li Yi's eyesight, he only saw a shadow. In the blink of an eye, she appeared in front of Lu Rui. Lu Rui's pretty face turned cold when she saw the old woman who seemed to want to harm Li Yi turn to her. She shook the long sword in her hand and the old woman withdrew her claws that were about to attack her neck. After a short confrontation, she had a general idea that this old lady was a powerful character. It would be unfavorable for her to display her strength in the room. After glancing at the old lady, she retreated. Little girl's skills are not bad. The old woman smiled and chased after her. Help me up, the two of them started fighting as soon as they met. Li Yi hurriedly got off the bed. Mingzu frowned but still held on to his arm. Don't worry, Granny Rome doesn't mean any harm. Li Yi could see that this granny didn't mean any harm. He was not worried that the old woman would do anything to Rui. The problem was that she had never seen Rui fight with others. It would be a waste not to see such a good show. He couldn't miss it. When he arrived at the courtyard, the sword in Rui's hand had already been thrown away. The old woman looked thin and weak, but she was not careless when she fought. The shadow of her claws flew everywhere. Li Yi couldn't help but think of the 9-in white bone claw. Who's more powerful? Li Yi didn't expect a white-haired old woman to be so powerful. He reckoned that even if he wasn't injured, he wouldn't be able to withstand her claws. Rui also didn't defeat the old woman in 2 or 3 moves as he had imagined. He didn't want her to know that there was always someone better than her. In the Yangtze River, the waves behind push the waves before, and the waves before die on the beach. I don't know. Mingsu casually replied to Li Yi as she looked at the woman in the courtyard, whose clothes were fluttering in the wind. She didn't seem to be at a disadvantage at all after fighting with Granny Rong for more than a dozen moves. For the first time, a look of surprise appeared on her pretty face. Although Granny Rong looked old, it would be a big mistake to measure her strength based on her appearance. How could the person who was sent from the palace to protect her be a simple person? As a princess, the resources that she enjoyed were unimaginable. She learned martial arts from a young age, and there were masters in the palace who personally taught her. When she encountered difficulties, there were masters who solved her problems. She practiced martial arts for 10 years to reach the realm she had today. This realm was achieved bit by relying on all kinds of unique conditions. But the strange woman in front of her, who was about the same age as her, actually had this kind of strength. She looked back at Li Yi. Birds of a feather flocked together. He and the people around him were really freaks. There was a lot of noise in the backyard. Fong was sitting in the shop in front. When he heard the noise, he hurriedly ran out. When he saw that someone was fighting with the second miss in the yard, he didn't think much. After being stunned for a moment, he roared and rushed over. In the next second, he flew out. After rolling on the ground in an undignified manner, he rubbed his aching chest and looked at the old woman as if he was looking at a monster. Oh my God, whose old woman is this? How can she be so powerful? The person who could send him flying with a casual kick was actually such an old granny. If this happened to the old people in the stockade, their old arms and legs would have been broken long ago. Just now, he was just excited. Now that he had calmed down, he quickly saw some clues. Although the two of them were fighting fiercely, their moves were relatively gentle. It didn't look like they were fighting with their lives, but more like they were learning from each other. Fong patted the dirt off his butt and leaned against the wall to watch the fight. Hee, young lady, your martial arts are not bad. The old woman's attack was once again blocked by Lu Rui. A smile appeared on her wrinkled face as she praised her. Not bad was just an excuse. She knew very well that this woman's martial arts could not be described with just the word, not bad. The young woman in front of her was probably the master swordsman who killed the 4 escaped criminals last night. The martial arts world wasn't big, but it wasn't small either. In the small Qing and prefecture, there were 2 master swordsmen at the same time. The possibility that they were both related to the little girl was too small. The old woman is not bad either. Lu Rui's expression was calm, but she was secretly shocked. This seemingly old woman was probably only 1 step away from the Grandmaster realm. The two of them seemed to be evenly matched, but they were just learning from each other. If they really fought with their lives on the line, she probably wouldn't be this old woman's match. She didn't have many opportunities to fight with outsiders. Yesterday, she killed someone in a fit of anger, which was also the first time in her life. After learning that Li Yi was fine, she recalled what happened and couldn't sleep for the whole night. She had always thought that most people in the martial arts world who deceived the world were like those 4 people. Today, when she fought with this old woman, she realized that there was always someone better than her. Young lady, didn't your master teach you not to be distracted when fighting with others? In a fight between masters, victory or defeat was decided in an instant. Her momentary distraction was naturally caught by the old woman. She chuckled and her claws suddenly sped up, reaching for her neck. By the time Lu Rui wanted to block, it was already too late. If it was a real life and death fight, there would only be one thing left for a person who was grabbed by the neck, such as the throat. Of course, the old woman didn't have such a thought. She didn't use any force. However, when her claws were about to touch the woman's neck, a white palm reached out from the side and covered her wrist. The palm pushed forward gently, and the old woman felt a gentle force coming from her wrist. She couldn't help but step back a few steps. If the princess hadn't come forward to support her, she would have fallen to the ground. What kind of kung fu is this? For the first time, the old woman's wrinkled face showed an extremely surprised expression. Mingzhu's eyes also moved to the face of the woman who just attacked. The simple push just now seemed familiar. After thinking for a while, she turned to look at Li Yi. "I'm sorry." Lu Rui smiled at the old woman apologetically. Even if this old woman didn't mean to hurt Rui, there was no guarantee that there wouldn't be any accidents. For Rui's safety, Lu Rui still pushed her away. She used the force of Tai Chi. Whether it was hard or soft depended on her thoughts. "Husband, who are these two people?" She turned to look at Li Yi and asked with a smile, "You're tuning into the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure."